purchase of the property, Lawrence commissioned architect Arthur B. Heaton to design the new residence. At the time, the family had been living in a large bungalow in Chevy Chase, Maryland, also designed by Heaton. And this familiarity with Heaton's designs may have influenced their decision to select him as the architect. Heaton's drawings are archived at the Library of Congress, and they include initial sketches like the one seen on the upper right-hand image, depicting a handsome Mediterranean revival-style residence, and that the design evolved over the course of a year into the asymmetrical Spanish colonial revival-styled residence that was ultimately built. And in the lower image, you can see it shortly after its completion. Next slide. Heaton, seen on the left, was a prolific architect in Washington in the early 20th century. After apprenticing with the firms of Marsh and Peter and with Paul Pelz, the architect of the Library of Congress building, Heaton undertook formal architectural training in Europe, where he studied at the Sorbonne in Paris. And upon returning to Washington, Heaton established an architectural practice, designing houses, commercial buildings, and apartment buildings in a range of architectural styles. And many of these have been recognized for their significance and also listed in the DC Inventory and National Register. Heaton's use of the Spanish colonial revival style is consistent with architectural trends of the period. The style, rooted in Spanish colonial traditions of the Americas, incorporates influences from Mediterranean, Mexican, Pueblo, and Moorish designs. And its popularity surged in the United States following the 1915 Panama, California Exposition held in San Diego. In 1922, just a year earlier, before he began the design for this project, Heaton employed the style in a design for a residence along Massachusetts Avenue. But his design for the Lawrence residence really reflects a more refined example and a progression in his application of the style. And we only know of those two Spanish colonial revival style designs implemented by Heaton in the city. The use of complex massing and asymmetrical facades, low-pitched roofs clad in clay tile, modeled stucco walls, arched openings, and wrought iron ornamentation are all characteristics of the style. And you can see here on the front and rear elevations, richly decorated cast stone entry portals are the focus of these elevations. And their designs draw inspiration from the eclectic plateresque style, as well as the Spanish Baroque churrigueresque style. Next. Heaton's plans for the surrounding landscape were unadorned, calling for a curved entry drive, which we also saw in the initial sketches for the property, modest stone terraces at the front and rear entrances, as well as a garage court accessing an integrated garage on the north elevation of the home. Unimproved areas on the plan were called out for areas reserved for future treatment. Interestingly, Heaton's drawing collection includes a landscape plan developed by noted female landscape architect Ruth Bramley Dean of New York. You can see her plan on the right side. Her plans propose the introduction of formal gardens, an orchard, a pool, tennis court, and a fence with a curved gate wall along Nebraska Avenue. However, unfortunately, Dean's vision was never implemented, reverting to a more simplified plan consistent with Heaton's earlier landscape plan. And you can go to the next. Construction began in January 1924 and was completed in November of that year. On this slide, you can see some of the architectural ornamentation, including the intricate design of the cast stone door surrounds, as well as the wrought iron elements. The crest above the facade entry, you can see on the right-hand image, the left-hand image, was originally incised with David and Eleanor Lawrence's initials, but was replaced following the purchase by the government of Sweden to the Swedish national emblem. Next. The Lawrence family occupied the residence from its completion in 1924 until 1945. David Lawrence was a prolific journalist and newspaper publisher who was best known for his conservative writings and for the magazine that he founded, the U.S. News and World Report. Though regarded as shy, Lawrence and his family, including wife Eleanor and daughter Nancy, and you can see Nancy in the center image, were frequently covered in local newspapers for their social events hosted at the house at 3900 Nebraska. This was not the family's only residence, however. They split their time between Washington, a dude ranch in Wyoming, and later a country residence in Clifton, Virginia, which is now part of the Eleanor C. Lawrence Park in Fairfax County. Lawrence's conservative politics were not always popular. He was critical of the civil rights movement, Truman's presidency, and communism, but he did maintain respect in some circles and was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 1970 by President Nixon for his contributions to journalism. Next. Thank you. In 1945, the Lawrence family permanently moved to their Virginia country estate in Clifton and sold 3900 Nebraska Avenue to the Madonna Realty Company. The Madonna Realty Company put the property up on the market for sale as an in-town estate. But in December of 1946, while preparing for showings of the house, a 3-alarm fire stemming from the boiler system in the basement destroyed much of the interior and required extensive renovations, requiring it to be taken off the market for a period. The following year, it was again put on the market for sale, but was unable to buy a buyer until 1950, when it was sold to the Swedish government for use as its ambassador's residence. Next. In 1951, a year after the Swedish government purchased the property, Ambassador Eric Bowman moved in with his family from their residence on R Street. As the new ambassador's residence, 3900 Nebraska was used as a tool of soft diplomacy and quickly became known for its large and elaborate receptions with high-profile guests, including foreign diplomats, Supreme Court justices, as well as Swedish royalty. Next. Jumping ahead to the 1970s, relations between Sweden and the US were strained in the early 1970s due to Sweden's staunch opposition to the war in Vietnam. After then Prime Minister Olof Palme compared the American bombing of Hanoi in 1972 with Nazi atrocities in World War II, the Nixon administration withdrew its officials from Stockholm and advised Sweden not to send a new ambassador to the United States. As a result, the property was vacated and remained vacant until tensions between the two countries settled in 1974. Next. That year, Wilhelm Wachtmeister was appointed as the new ambassador and moved into their residence with his wife Ulla, resuming the property's role in the diplomatic social scene. And during the couple's 15-year tenure, 3900 Nebraska gained reputation as one of the most elegant venues in the city, known for its exclusive parties and receptions, but the couple was also known to open the house up to the general public as well for events. In 2003, jumping ahead, Sweden announced the construction of a new main embassy to be called the House of Sweden in Georgetown. And following its completion, the Swedish government made the decision to consolidate the ambassador's residence with the Chancery to provide a more modern and central location for embassy activities and events. In 2019, Ambassador Olofsdotter was the last ambassador to reside in 3900 Nebraska, moved to the House of Sweden, and at that time the residence was vacated prior to its sale earlier this year in 2023. Next. So we're nominating the property for listing under National Register Criterion A and DC Criterion B, as the property is significant for its social history and for its role in diplomatic history. It is also being nominated under National Register Criterion C and associated DC criteria D, E, and F as a significant example of the Spanish colonial revival style, featuring plateresque, Churrigueresque, and mission style detailing. And it's also significant as the work of Arthur B. Heaton, who has been recognized as a master for his importance in the field of architecture. The period of significance for the property extends from 1924, the date of the completion, until 1972, which was a really important year in the history of Sweden's ownership, when the ambassador was recalled to Sweden during diplomatic tensions with the United States. Next slide. Alterations to the property are relatively minor. They're limited to the addition of a sunroom on the second floor of the south elevation, highlighted in yellow in the image. Another one-story addition on the north end, added in the 1980s, which you can see in blue on the north side. The addition of a freestanding garage. As I mentioned, the building was remodeled, renovated in 1946 after the fire broke out in the basement, and was again remodeled in the 1970s and 80s to fit the needs of the Swedish ambassador. And then replacement of windows and doors at an unknown date, matching the historic appearance. Despite these changes, the property retains a high degree of integrity from the period of significance, including integrity of location, setting, design, workmanship, materials, feeling, and association. Next. And then finally, the boundary of the landmark encompasses approximately 2.7 acres corresponding to lot 832 within square 1596. These boundaries have been delineated in close consultation with HPO staff and the DC Preservation League in order to preserve the house and the landscape features that contribute to the property's significance, while excluding peripheral areas that do not directly contribute to the significance per National Register guidance. And that concludes my quick presentation. If you go to the next slide, I'm happy to take any questions on the nomination.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. Any questions from board members?
Chair, just one quick question of Sarah. I don't know if it's part of the scope or not, but is there any activity?
Can you start over, Gretchen? You just said you're breaking
any
up.
chance for? Yes. Is there any chance for pre-European settlement activity on the site?
We can't hear you, Sarah. You're muted.
Is there any chance?
No,
sorry, I don't know how that happened.
It was Sarah who was muted.
Oh,
yeah, that was me. I'm sorry. No, not that we've identified or are aware of, but that is certainly something that we can look into.
Okay.
Thanks, Sarah. That's my question. Sorry, I'm so electronically problematic here.
I muted myself somehow, so I'm sorry.
All right. Any other questions for Sarah? All right. Then, Tim, I know you said you probably wouldn't have much to add, but is there anything you'd like to at this time?
Yeah, well, just to recap, we feel that it's a strong example of the Spanish colonial revival style that had notable residents, and thus it meets DC designation criteria B for history and D, E, and F for architecture. The end date for the period of significance is, of course, a bit arbitrary since it continued in the Swedish embassy use until recently, but the date is based on an event that occurred a bit more than 50 years ago, and the period encompasses a period of use as well as major remodeling. We would suggest adding old before the title of the landmark. Not that we like to lengthen landmark names nor add unnecessary modifiers, but we think it might avoid confusion with active Swedish diplomatic properties in the future. And we also wish to acknowledge not only the significance of the house, but also character-defining landscape features such as the driveways, walks and steps, the Nebraska Avenue perimeter fence, the front and rear flagstone terraces, and the rear parterre. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. And Sarah, on behalf of the applicant, would you see any issue with making these updates to the nomination?
No, I don't see any issue. I did want to just point out that the existing fence is not historic and is of modern construction added in recent years. So I would exclude that, but I think we could add some additional narrative on landscape elements if the board wished.
Okay. Okay.
And the change of the name.
Wait.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, and we may do a little more editing with regard to sort of stylistic influences. This example is fairly restrained, with the exception of the kind of bold entry frontispieces. We're not really so convinced that it's very Plateresque, for instance, which is more flamboyant, and it doesn't really have much in the way of Mudéjar, plaster influences or Gothic influences and that sort of thing. So it's largely Baroque, which of course has its own sort of dynamism. So I think there are probably various tweaks before we send it on to the National Register.
Okay. Any other questions from board members?
Yeah, Tim, I'm glad you brought that up. This is Gretchen. And maybe it's a question for you and Sarah both, but in this style, the relationship between the volume of the building itself and the roof line and chimneys all seems to be fairly sort of orthographic, not curvilinear and dynamic. Is that due to this more restrained style of the architecture, or do you think that there's latitude within the style for that?
Well, I mean, I think if you speak broadly of Spanish colonial revival, I think you're talking about something that is generally restrained, that is often plainer and characterized by sort of unelaborated stucco finishes. But there are, of course, stylistic flourishes that are intended to be focal points, as the entries are here. And of course, American architects employing the style often searched around, whether it be in Central or South America or in Spain, for some kind of precedence for such things. No one really wanted to create a stucco box, and so it was important to decorate it to a point, and yet I think it's being quote unquote colonial. I think it was necessarily more restrained than some of the more flamboyant work that was done back in Spain.
Thanks, Tim. That's helpful.
All right. Any other questions? We don't have anyone registered to speak or testify on this application. So if there are no other questions, is there anyone else from your team, Sarah, who wanted to say anything?
I think that's it. We're gonna go on to the concept after this, if it's designated. I would just say again, a big thank you to the DC Preservation League for their support in this application, as well as HPO staff for working with us on this.
All right, great. Yes. Okay, then I will ask board members to turn on your cameras so that we can deliberate. If you can, turn on your cameras. All right. And I'll just start by asking if anyone has any issues they'd like to bring up prior to me making a motion to support the nomination.
I would, Chair Heath, I would just ask if there would be a consideration for documenting any settlements or types of activities that might have pre-existed the European settlement.
Okay. Any other things that people would like to see added to this? All right. Then I will make a motion that we support the nomination and ask that the applicant work with staff to add the additional documentation that the board has recommended and that staff recommended through the course of the hearing.
I'll
So
second.
moved.
Second.
All right, so the motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone oppose? Great, then the motion carries. We're ready to move on to the next application, which is the concept for this residence. And I'll ask staff to make your presentation and then we'll hear from the applicant.
Morning, this is Steve Colcott. As Sarah talked about during the nomination or the designation hearing, the applicants have been working with our office and the DC Preservation League over the course of maybe the past 9 or 12 months or so on pursuing both designation of the property and discussing the renovation that they'll be doing. And through that collaboration, they have modified their plans a number of times in response to preservation-related concerns. The project that's before you calls for 2 additions on the back side of the property on sort of each rear wing of the property, as well as renovation and restoration of the main portion of the building. I'll let the applicants walk you through the plans in detail, but we are recommending approval of the concept. We think it's compatible and consistent with the in retaining the character defining features, while also making some updates to the property. As Sarah outlined during the designation hearing, the garage is a non-contributing building. It was built in the 1980s. That is proposed to be replaced in essentially the same footprint, but as a 2-story building, and it would be connected to the house with an arcade, a 2-story arcade. There are also some landscape alterations that are in some respects inspired, although not replicative, of the plans that were never executed for the property for some formal gardens and additional landscaping to enhance the existing landscaping. The driveway would be maintained. The rear and front terraces will need to be reconstructed. They've settled a lot and are very sort of uneven right now, but the stone will be reused and the patterning will be replicated. Our sort of latest challenge to the applicant was to consider in replacing the perimeter fence, and specifically the perimeter fence as it faces Nebraska Avenue. They were proposing initially a solid masonry wall that to help with both buffering the sound as well as just sort of hiding the traffic on Nebraska Avenue. We challenged them to think about how that could be made a little bit more porous, visually open, so that there'd still be some visibility of the landmark, and they'll walk you through the revision to that. So with those comments, I'll turn it over to the architects and they can walk you through the plans in more detail.
Thank you, Steve. Madam Chair, would it be appropriate for me to start the presentation?
Absolutely, you can proceed.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Andrew Barnes of BVA, Barnes Vance Architects in Washington, D.C. We're delighted to be able to present this project to you today, and we thank you for your help, and particularly the help of both HPO staff and DCPL on the journey that's led to what we have today. As staff has described here today, this is a wonderful house, and we've been trying to treat it gently while expanding it to be a larger and more appropriate for current living single-family residence. If we can go to the next slide, please. I believe you've all seen the drawings, so I'll just try and move fairly quickly through the presentation to leave time for questions. Here again is the aerial photograph that shows the designated lot. Our attempt here in discussion with HPO staff and others was to allow a generous amount of land around the property, because one of the most significant features of the house, of course, is the integrity of setting, the sort of country estate set back from the road, and so on. And this, I think, is preserved in the, close to 3 acres of land. Let's go to the next slide, please. Thank you. This is the existing site plan sort of survey. You can see the curved driveway coming in very much like Arthur Heaton's plan. There is at the lower part of the drawing a sort of a lay-by for parking. One of the practical challenges, or a couple of the practical challenges of the driveway, which we believe is original and which we're substantially proposing to retain, is that it's really in a single lane. There's very little parking on site. If you were to drop off some sort of guest at the front door, you pretty much have to go either reverse to get down to the parking court by the garage at the top of the drawing, or pull over to the 4 or 5 spots in the front. Or you have to go on Nebraska Avenue and try your luck to getting around. One of the other things I'll point out is there were 2 large ginkgo trees framing the entrance, sort of providing a balance. We know the facade is balanced but not symmetrical, and right now only one of those remains. There are other heritage trees on the property, but I'll point that tree out because we propose to move it a little further away from the front of the house and still keep it in the front yard, but allow us to plant some balanced trees again. The non-contributing garage you see in the top left of the drawing, and you can see a non-original but old retaining wall and stairs to the lower garden, which was never developed, as you heard in the earlier presentation. Next slide, please. Just in photographs, top left is the front, top right is the left side going around the garden. You can see the non-original addition of kind of a sunroom. Well, there's the building on the right with the 3 arches is a sunroom that was added by Arthur Heaton, possibly an open porch initially. He had early drawings for it earlier than its construction in 1940, but it was added later. The middle photograph on the left, you can see the back elevation. There's been a fair amount of change in and around the garages and the kitchen area. The elevated rear facade, middle right that you see, that was a handsome picture, and shows the big awnings which have been there for a long time, but do obscure a lot of the back of the house. We have a proposal to provide other covered seating at the back to be able to open up the back facade. The non-contributing garage in all its glory is lower left. Next, please. Some features of the house you've heard about: the very elegant cast stone front entry door on the left, or door surround, the rear, which embraces a window, the next one to the right, one of the typical French doors that goes into the sunroom on the middle right, and one really lonely but elegant piece of wrought iron, fairly elaborate, that covers the window. We propose to relocate this and to repurpose it and use it elsewhere in the design. The middle left photograph of the roof is just to show you that the roof line against the sky has been modulated quite carefully, clearly by the designer, the architect, to have a very sort of hierarchical arrangement of roof lines that sort of cascade down. The eaves also change a bit, and these areas of flat roof can lead to some unfortunate details. We found a way to waterproof this after discussing this with HPLB and DCPL staff, where we will not change the roof line against the sky. Very simple chimney on the left with a window in it, and detail of the cast stone on the right. These front entries and back entries were actually meant to be limestone, cut limestone until late in the process, and it seems as if the house went through some value engineering. You can see another flat roof modulation lower left, and one of the rear wings, the original lanterns out front, middle, lower right, and one of the double arched windows with the cast stone column in it. A number of these were shown in original design to also have little wrought iron balcony decorative motifs below them, which seem to have also been value engineered out of the project. Next slide, please. This shows our proposed site plan, and the flesh-colored areas are where we propose the 2 additions that you heard from HPS staff at the back right and the back left. On the back left, which is the southwest, there's a smaller addition set farther back to be able to accommodate some program above, and a very large covered porch. On this side, this is sort of, in our minds, if you will, a cocktail destination as a way of getting rid of one of the big awnings that's been covering the back of the main facade of the house for a long time. There's a fireplace, beautiful view over the yard, sort of looks out over the rolling acreage at the back, one of the features of the house. At the top of the drawing, you can see some service enhancements at the top, at the end on the right where the kitchen is. We are proposing a small addition to the rear wing on the right, which would allow us a bigger family room, and then a covered arcade that you heard about from staff that leads to the garage, which is 2 stories above the courtyard and has another walk story below to the pool, which is currently has the current garage has that walkout feature. As mentioned by staff earlier, you can see we're proposing a formal garden and an orchard, which were both features that were proposed by Arthur Heaton. Something else I'll point out on the front entry, you can see the main driveway is retained, but we are proposing right opposite the front door, while retaining and relaying the original paving, which you heard about outside the front door, which stretches between the wings. We propose to add a modest entry court to increase the feeling of arrival and allow actually one car to be unloading while another car moves around. Then the checkered area to the right that's close to the street, and both of these areas are proposed to be in paving that is non-porous, that is porous paving. That allows a return around the driveway without going into Nebraska Avenue to be able to get down to the parking, and it's got a lay-by for a few cars there for the occasional event. You can see also the heritage tree that I mentioned earlier to the right of the front door has been moved up in the lawn a little bit. We're proposing a pair of new trees to frame the entrance. And I'll point out on the lower left as well, there are 3 heritage trees in a row against the back boundary on the left of the slide, which are being moved up from the lower lot, which also belongs to the same owner and applicant. And these are being moved up to sort of move them out of the way of the development below there, more importantly, to help enclose and preserve a sort of green oasis around the house. Next slide, please. This is the more sort of glamorous rendered version of our site plan, but you can see the same features are fairly evident. I'll point out one other thing about the driveway. You may have noticed in the landscape architect's plan that there was a curved entry flanking the gates on either side. This was mentioned in Sarah's presentation. This is to be able to allow a car to pull forward and not have its stern sticking out into the extremely busy sidewalk along Nebraska Avenue, and our proposal is to do the same. It's very practical. It's also a little more elegant. Next slide, please. Just a quick summary of the fences. You can see in the middle right picture is one of the current but not old stucco covered piers, which are very far apart with a wrought iron fence between them. On the right-hand side, right-hand top slide, you see the fence that's just to the southwest to the church, just an open wrought iron fence. On the middle left slide, you see the fence to the ambassador's residence, which is to the northeast of us, which is also open. And the wall that you see is a unique feature just to the courtyard, which is sunken down to the ground. You can see that Nebraska in the middle of the slide, and you can see our elevation across the lower part of the slide. And as was mentioned by staff, you can see that the gates are completely open wrought iron, and we proposed a wrought iron top to a lower wall to try and meet in the middle on the notion of constraining the noise, which is profound when you're standing at the front door or even inside the residence today. Nebraska is so much busier today than it used to be. But if the wall we're proposing at 42 inches is still below eye level if you're either walking, riding a bike, or riding in a car. So it should provide the sort of wide open vision of the house that you drive by, which is one of its defining features. Next slide, please. These 2 sketches over the Google Earth photographs of the house show you the proposal. I'll talk about the drawing on the left. Initially, you can see our proposed addition way left on the corner with its open arches looking to the garden. We are proposing a sort of enclosed pergola addition on top of the existing sunroom and a new chimney at that end. There is actually the fireplace was turned around and actually addresses the room on the left, the sunroom, but it divides those 2 big chambers in half. We're proposing to move the fireplace to the outside wall. If we go to the right-hand slide, the right-hand image rather, you can see the developed sort of service court where we're bringing back an arcade with garages back in the building, which was Heaton's original intent. It was actually something of a car nut, apparently, but the garage bays are too shallow for cars today. And for the service of our sort of connection on the second floor, we're proposing to move that outside wall out a bit in this facade, which is not particularly intact anymore anyway. The new garage building you see very close to the original location in the front lower right of the slide. And down below at the bottom, you see the pool, the orchard, and the formal garden. There's also a two-story addition we're proposing sort of within the footprint of the courtyard to add one more bedroom, which sits behind the garden wall that has always enclosed the parking court and behind an addition that was done earlier on the first floor. You can also see in that right-hand slide how the back of the house, the back terrace, is now completely open to the sky, and you can see our proposed arcaded covered porch for cocktails on the top right there. Next slide, please. Inferences that we have looked at, as Danae said earlier, there's certainly a sort of an eclectic array of inferences that have been brought to bear in the use of this style in America, and we have looked exclusively within this country for those examples as well. We think that there should not be too much flamboyance to this facade or to this proposal, in line with what you've heard. But you'll see middle left, there's the rear facade of George Washington Smith's Casa de Herrera, which is in many ways a similar residence, a similar period, and one of the great houses of the time that has been an inspiration to us, as some of these other images are. Let's go on, please. Next slide. Arthur Heaton's drawings you've seen before, perhaps we can go on. You've seen these already. Next slide, please. The front facade, the existing, in all of these, the existing elevation is top right, and the proposed elevation is in larger in the middle. I'll draw your attention to the front door. You can see the photograph in the top middle. It is not the original door, wooden paneling, but sort of two panels with a paneled transom at the top and arch. What we're proposing to do, this being south facing, is very consistent with this style, is actually to do a wooden door with a solid lower panel. You see it in the middle left drawing, top middle left drawing, with a simple wrought iron screen in front of glass, allowing sunlight into the front courtyard, front hallway of the house, which is a prominent circulation feature of the house. You can see in the lower drawing on the left, all the way to the left, our new chimney, and way back on the left is our proposed second floor extension. You can see that the roof line of this extension steps down to be subservient or appropriately hierarchically minor compared to the main roof of the house. On the right-hand side of the same drawing, you'll see our proposed second floor addition, and here the roof line is lower still for the same reasons. We have also lowered the eave line of this proposed wing, which is true of the service wing at the back of the house to which it is attached. Next, please. This is the side facade southwest. You can see our new chimney, our double arched element in the middle of the new wing that we're pushing out, which has a decorative it's actually a proposed tile element below it, rather like the balconies which were proposed by Heaton earlier on. Arched doors to match those that are already in the sunroom. You can see the window lower right, and the left-hand piece is the arcaded entrance to or openings to the covered porch. Here we are proposing the use of a little bit of cast stone, not flamboyant like the entries at all, but a little bit of cast stone to mark the size of these openings and provide just a little bit of relief and a little bit of tension to the facade. Next, please. And this is the rear elevation. See that same element in the lower right with the 6 windows of the master bedroom, principal bedroom, top right that you see. On the left-hand side, you can see our massing, which is fairly picturesque, fairly simple in massing, but in the section it looks like it's a little more elaborate. But you understand that cut through the 2-story arcade that leads from the service wing of the house to the kitchen, to the garage. Next, please. This is the garage courtyard side, the northeast elevation, and you can see the arcaded proposal that we have for the connection to the garage. There are 2 garages there, and then some glass-filled bays which lead to sort of mudroom and so on. And then there's a wider arch with a sort of bridge condition through small openings above. This was our design was changed in response to a walkthrough very early on with HBO staff, where they felt that when one walked down into this courtyard, that the view through to the lower garden was significant, and we did this as a way to be able to preserve that while still connecting both buildings. Next, please. This is the garage elevations. On the left, the one that you see from the driveway, fairly simple, modest windows above garage doors with a bracketed central light fixture above each of the garage doors, very typical of the period, sort of bracketed hinge. And on the right, you can see the elevation that you see from the pool. This is the only tall facade in the whole house, and so our proposal is to put a bracketed cantilevered roof above the arches that open from the pool support space to the pool at the lower level. We're proposing a small tower, fairly simple in detailing, just to receive the arch and give a little bit of interest to this massiveness that's stitched around the back. Next, please. So some sections. If you look at the one on the top, you can see the tower and the opening to the garage court, which gives you the view through to the garden. And in the middle of that same slide, you can see 3 pairs of French doors that are square-headed. This is the proposed covered eating area, which again provides an amenity close to the kitchen and allows us to open the rear facade of the house. In the right of that same slide, you can see one of the few original features we believe in the house is the stair was either reconstructed or was actually able to be restored. We're proposing a small skylight with a lay light above it, which is hidden behind the parapeted wall in the front facade. In the lower left slide, you can see the open arcade that sort of leads to the covered porch for cocktails on the right, with the principal bedroom balcony above, and the photograph on the right is of that pretty decorative wrought iron cover to the window. We propose to put that to the left of those arches that you see in the middle of that drawing. In the lower left part of the section, you can see our proposed opening between the original ballroom and the sort of ballroom extension or sunroom, allowing you to connect the 2 spaces, keeping original walls left and right, while seeing through to the windows and the proposed new fireplace. Next, please. This section just through the middle of the house, pretty straightforward. Down in the lower part on the top left, you can see the proposed section through the what I'm calling a cocktail porch with a tile-covered fireplace and connection into the ballroom and then principal bedroom above. To the left of that is original material. Next slide, please. These are some sort of accurate 3-dimensional SketchUp views of the house as seen from peering through either gate to the house. If we look through, if one removes the landscaping, showing on the lower slide the sort of parking court down to the left and our setback post and a addition on the right. On the left-hand side, new chimney and sort of new addition at the back left. Next, please. Top slide shows a sort of area of that whole parking court and connection. You can see how the large arch in the bridge allows the views through to the garden and the parking court. That connection is maintained. On the lower left slide, I actually neglected to mention, we would propose to increase the size of the lawn at the back of the house by pushing out the retaining wall and a slightly more dramatic stair going down to the lower garden, just because we feel that so much entertaining has taken place and will take place on that rear lawn, and we felt that it was a little underscaled as built. As I mentioned, it was not original, although the wall is early. The picture on the lower right shows the retaining wall at the bottom end of our middle lawn, where the parterre and the orchard would be, down to the lower open garden, which is part of the property, and you can see the garage with the pool in the lower left. Next page. Just to the plans. In these plans, the shaded area is original, and the area in white is proposed construction. This is at the lower level. We do not propose to use the lower level extensively for owner uses. There's quite a bit of service space. The whole left side of the property, the main wing, is currently crawl space. We propose to keep it that way. We would dig out about 18 inches underneath the middle right of the house. There's a new circular stair that brings the owner and his guests down, her guests down to the lower level. You can see the 2 garage bays, one in the original volume and one proposed in the proposed addition. You can see the cars parked there, and you can see the small extension and lengthening of that wing that we are proposing. Middle right, the footprint is a little muddled. There's a walk-in freezer down there right now as part of a commercial kitchen from the old Swedish occupation, and we propose just to have a simpler sort of service kitchen down there, and a back stair from the parking court up to the main level. Next, please. Here on the principal floor, the main floor, you can see the original footprint substantially preserved. enhanced a little bit with additions that sort of square out the kitchen support area to the right of that spiral stair. And the one bay we're proposing to extend the family room at the back of the kitchen's covered porch next to that I mentioned earlier for dining close to the kitchen. And on the left, the addition that is substantially a covered porch, cocktails on the left side, and a bar sort of an invitation to the garden, which is at the back of the ballroom. Next, please. Up on the second floor, again, existing footprint substantially preserved. Expansion of the principal suite on the left that you see, the white areas on the right-hand side, the additional bedroom we're proposing to add, and middle top right is a terrace above, proposed terrace above an existing bedroom volume above the family room that we propose to extend. Next, please. Once again, the roof lines substantially preserved. You can see the flat areas that exist in the house now and the one that is proposed above the principal suite on the left to keep those roof lines the way we think they best respect the existing house. And the little detail in the middle top shows you how we are planning to waterproof that little trough area, which has led to leaking and trouble in the house right now without changing the roof line. This again in response to comments from both DCPL and HPO staff. Next, please. These are the plans of the garage, the proposed garage. The drawing on the right is 4 bays, and over the parking porch with a stair that goes up and down, and next to it, and the paved area with the big arch leading through with views from the garden. The drawing on the left is the second floor that shows, the lower level that shows pool support and a stair to get down there. Next slide, please. And this just shows the second floor of the garage building, but it's actually off of the main floor of the main house, which is a large laundry and staff bedrooms and staircases in connection, really in support of the main house. And then on the right, you can see the roof plan. Next slide, please. It's really the end of the presentation, and here I've just put the perspectives back up, and we'd be delighted to answer questions and take comments. Thank you. This is my presentation.
All right, thank you. Any questions from board members? Any questions at this time? All right. Then we will come back to the board for questions later in the hearing, but I'd like to ask Rebecca Miller if she's on the line to make her statement.
Good morning, Chair Heath and members of the board.
Good morning.
Hi, hello, happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Yeah, thank you. So my name is Rebecca Miller. I'm the Executive Director of the DC Preservation League. Thank you for hearing this case this morning, and thank you for designating the old Swedish Ambassador's House, as it will be called in the future. We've had a great year working with this team, both the owners and traceries and the Historic Preservation Office, on coming up with what you see before you today. I think it's everybody has had a great dialogue going forward, and so we've come up with a project that we hope you support. So thank you so much.
All right, thank you, Rebecca. Any other questions, or any questions now from the board? If not, are we ready to?
I do have some questions about some of the design features.
Okay.
If you don't mind.
Sure.
I'd like to start at the front door, I guess. And one of the questions I have is the historic detail that's shown. The historic drawing, it's hard to read the historic drawing because the resolution of some of the lettering is not completely legible at the resolution that we have for our documents, but it looked to me like the opening showed one interior face and one exterior face for the door detail that was designed. And my initial question is, why wouldn't you replicate the exterior detail rather than the curvilinear interior detail when you're recreating the historic core?
Thank you for your question. It's a good question. It's interesting that we just felt that a slight reference to that there are sort of Baroque curves, or if you will, mission style curves to two of the gables, the small gables on the house, and of course all the Baroque details around the entry. We thought that a small flourish in the panel of the door itself would be appropriate. So it's just a design proposal of something that we thought would be elegant, but of course it's certainly something that we could revise. Since, as you correctly state, the historic image, I believe it's the right-hand 4-panel scheme that is was the original outside face of the door.
Thank you. And then with this image up is a perfect image for my next question. The 2 square windows atop the cast stone opening, those are new. Those are not original to the building, correct? You're using those to provide daylighting into the gallery?
Exactly. I apologize for omitting that. Yes, they are very small, and the idea is that I think they would be not that visible and not enter into any combat with this beautiful front door. But it's exactly that. Is a very dark bay in the second floor original hallway they proposed to keep there, and so it is really all to allow some daylight and some sunlight in there. Yes, unadorned windows is what we were proposing.
Okay. And then I think shifting to the west side of the building, if the west elevation is where the chimney, you're recreating the chimney with the curvilinear form.
Yes.
There's a note on some of the drawings that says a Spanish Revival chimney cap. And then you've got this sort of pocket and the curvilinear form, but this is the only curved form in all of the architecture of the building other than the arched windows. As part of the original historic vocabulary. Could you talk a little bit about the decision to make this more of an organic or expressive form that seems to be, to me initially, more not from a Spanish colonial revival, but maybe another Spanish revival style?
That's interesting. I respect the point that's brought up. We did have some sort of colonial Spanish revival chimney caps, if you will, which we had earlier. I'm sorry about the incorrect note that remains on the drawing. And they looked actually as if they were drawing too much attention to themselves. And the proposal here was to put a pair of chimneys on either side of the house that would clearly be part of the later work, and it being slightly different design would actually advertise their later heritage, but would provide a simpler profile that would be less distracting from the original chimneys, which are fairly modest, which are buried in the middle of the volume of the house and the roofscape. That was our thought, but of course open to suggestion or alternatives.
And there's no difference in material. Thank you. There's no difference in material between the base and the shaft of the chimney, correct? It's all the
Correct.
same stucco pattern.
It's all proposed to be the same stucco, very similar, slightly modulated stucco like the original.
Mm-hmm. And the sill of the opening at the top, is that clay tile?
It's proposed to be clay tile, just in a very simple decorative pattern. Again, something you see a lot in this style. Although there's none of it in the original house, it's certainly something you see a lot in the Spanish colonial revival style.
Mm-hmm. And then on the east elevation, that shows the arch. Well, actually, the west. Yeah, oh, that's perfect, right there.
Yes.
The opening between the garage, where you have the 3 windows together,
Yes.
you've got sort of this loggia that goes across the opening. Is the a surround for that arch to be cast stone, or is that just a raised stucco detail?
Our thought was raised stucco because of the modesty of the location. It is really just a change in plane, probably to attract a little dirt and sort of a pencil line over time. No cost on there.
The geometry, because of the width of those windows and the archways underneath as well, the proportions just seem different to the more circular arches because they're wider, right? It's a wider.
They are, exactly. To get a full semicircular opening in any of those cases, they would need to be narrow. And again, for practical garage doors, for now, these are 9-foot doors. They're not that wide, but wide enough. And we couldn't get what seemed to be an appropriate accommodation for a garage entry there. So we went to the 3-pointed arch, which is certainly something you see in this architecture. You don't see it in this house. Elsewhere,
Right.
that you see it in this architecture, and it is the service court. So that was our proposal. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Did you look at using a post and lintel, not an arched opening? So you'd
One
have a
could
flat.
certainly do it. One could do a trabeated opening. We didn't think it was as elegant as the repeat of the arches, which is why we settled on the arches. But we did look at that as well, and it's certainly an option. We just thought this was a little more elegant because of the repetition.
And I couldn't get up close, as you can imagine. I couldn't get up close to the building, but what type of stucco is on the building now?
It's a very good question. It's very interesting. It is a modulated, sort of uneven, slightly wavy stucco, which seems to be in extremely good condition. The building seems to be well built and engineered. There are really no settlement cracks. So it's that slightly modulated surface, which adds a little bit of detail in a very subtle manner when you get close to it, because the house looks very flat, and as pointed out by Scott earlier, it's very simple in its massing. But when you get close, it gives a little light and shadow. We propose to emulate that.
Thanks, Chair, and thank you to the applicant. Thank you, Chair Heath. Those were my questions.
Okay. Do any other board members have questions? All right. Then are we ready to deliberate? Okay, perfect. Then I'll ask those who can to turn on their cameras. All right. And does anyone have any opening thoughts they'd like to share? Issues or concerns?
I'll share some thoughts based on the questions that I just asked, and one of the questions I asked during the nomination about the style. I'll starting with these arched openings. Now that I understand a little more about the detailing of them and how they look and the design thought that went into them, I don't have an issue, although the proportion is different than any other arches on the historic building. I don't think that detracts from the character of what remains of the historic building and the integrity of it. I feel differently about the chimney and the two windows over the door. The chimney is the only thing that has this curvilinear form to it. You see it here in the elevation we were just at, and then you see it also in the elevation that Steve is showing now, or Bruce, who's ever driving. But it's the only thing that is that shape and form, and the emphasis is on the home and the property, not the chimney or the hearth. It's not a main design element or design feature, as is often found in some other styles. And so I might request the simplification of that chimney to be more similar to the original chimney that was there, or the other styles of chimney, rather than have it be this unique sort of design flourish that doesn't seem to be contiguous. It just detracts, to me, it detracts from, it's beautiful, but it detracts from the character of the style of the building. The reason that I might ask that they remove the windows from the gallery on the second floor, I think it's a really creative, good idea. And in general, it's very interesting how the architects thought how the layering of the house would work together. There's some very interesting sort of programmatic. It took me a while to really understand the design solution. It's just very tightly knit as a solution. So congratulations. It's a beautiful, beautiful solution in working a lot of program into the design. But I don't think the windows should be there, in part because the surround around the door is one of the original remaining elements with a lot of high degree of integrity to it. And so I think surrounding that should be remaining to retain its integrity. There have been a lot of changes on the building through time, but this is part that in my opinion, from the nomination and the presentation from tracers on those elements, it retains a lot of integrity. So the two things that I might propose to change would be to remove those windows in the gallery, and then that are on either side of the front entrance, and then simplify the chimney.
Okay.
I just to weigh in here. I kind of feel the same way about the little windows over the front entry, but the chimney I'm sort of agnostic about, to tell you the truth. The curve is okay. But the little windows do seem a little bit out of character.
Mhm. Yeah, I
But I
could.
think it's a very, very nice design.
Yeah.
Mhm. It is. It is. It's quite nice. I could live with the chimney too.
I wouldn't bring it up except that it's really a strong element on that elevation,
It is.
and it's so different than everything else on the house. And it stood out to me right away.
Okay.
And,
Yeah,
and that's why
I
it's
didn't have the
distracting.
yeah, I didn't have the same reaction, quite honestly.
Okay.
But
The windows, though, definitely
Mhm.
do stand out. But we'll see if anyone else agrees with the chimney. Anyone else have thoughts?
Just that it's a beautiful structure,
Yeah.
Mhm.
Madam Chair. It's
Mhm.
absolutely beautiful.
It is. Yeah. Thank you.
It's really stately as a building. Just it has this sort of sereneness to its design. It's just beautiful, and I wish I could have gotten closer to look at that stucco. I'm really curious about it, actually.
Mm.
You know, one other thing that I wonder about too with the landscape, now that I'm thinking about the stucco, is and it I guess relates to sustainability. I don't really have an opinion one way or other on the curves. I think the curves in the back are a little different than the original landscape that was there, which is all rectilinear as well. But I don't really have a strong opinion about the relationship of that design to this architecture. It doesn't feel like the same style, but the style of the landscape never really was the same style as the style of the building because they simplified it way down so it almost had no style, as it were. It just was a rectilinear patio, so it didn't have any kind of expression of formalized design or coordination with the building other than proximity to openings, for logistics. So I don't have an issue with that. I do hope that they're able to manage and work on all the stormwater on site and contain all of it. They've got a lot of property here, and so I hope that's something that they're able to do in the renovation of this building, is manage all the stormwater on site.
Mhm. Okay.
I wouldn't put that. I just note that wouldn't put it as a preservation requirement, but this is a great opportunity.
Okay. All right, then I will make a motion that we support the concept and ask that the applicant work with staff to remove the windows, the gallery windows on either side of the, or re-examine the gallery windows, preferably removing them on either side of the entry, and that they look at possibly reshaping the chimney so that it's no longer curved. Is there?
I'll second, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Then all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, thank you. Very beautiful. Beautiful
Thank
project.
you, everyone. We appreciate your support. We will work with staff with pleasure. The comments were all very incisive. Thank you so much. Good day.
All right, so we're ready to proceed on with our next application, which is at 1900 Gallaudet Street Northeast. Let's
Good
do the
morning.
presentation first.
Morning, Madam Chair and members of the board. This is Andrew Lewis with the DC Historic Preservation Office. We are very pleased to introduce a long overdue project this morning that proposes rehabilitation on restoration of the historic Crummell School, or Crummell School, and the construction of new additions that together will provide a new community and recreation center for the Ivy City neighborhood. The project is sponsored by the Department of Parks and Recreation and is being designed by Sword Architects. Crummell School is a DC landmark and listed in the National Register. It was designed by noted municipal architect Snowden Ashford in 1910 and is a relatively rare example of Ashford's early work in the eclectic Elizabethan style that predates CFA's later insistence on the colonial revival being used for all district schools. Construction was completed in 1911, and the new facility was named in honor of noted African-American abolitionist, Episcopal priest, and Professor Alexander Crummell, who lived from 1819 to 1898. The school has been abandoned and sitting empty for decades, so it is in very poor condition, as you might expect. But despite this, it still retains a relatively high degree of integrity, since the only significant changes to the building were limited to a 1930s addition on the second story that replaced the original meeting hall with 2 extra classrooms. The current proposal involves rehabilitating the historic school to provide multi-purpose spaces on the interior and constructing new additions that will provide space for community gatherings and exhibits, fitness center, and a gymnasium. The site will also be rehabilitated to accommodate a variety of active and passive recreational spaces, bioretention areas, and parking. HPO fully supports the concept, which will respect the historic school by restoring some interior features, setting new construction back and limiting its height to maintain views to the original building, utilizing compatible materials, reconstructing missing features such as the cupola and the southern dormer, and by improving the surrounding site. Our only recommendation is that the checkerboard pattern for the exterior be limited, especially on elevations that are directly adjacent to the historic school, such as the east elevation. HPO is looking to the board for advice on that proposal and any other topics that the board may find relevant. Otherwise, we recommend the board find the concept compatible with the landmark as outlined in the staff report and delegate all remaining design review to HPO. And with that, I will turn the project over to the sponsors and architects for a more detailed presentation.
Great, thank you, Andy. We're ready to hear from the applicant and team.
Hello, this is Siman Sorg. Can you see me or hear me?
We can hear you, yes.
The project is, as Andrew said, in Northeast DC in Ivy City. It's an old historic school that's been abandoned since 1977. And it sits on a site that is a concrete slab that was designed to hold buses at one point, but will be removed. And it has an existing, fairly new set of courts to the east, which we are hoping to keep part of them, or if not all of them, and a newish playground also on the east of the site. Next. So the site borders New York Avenue. It's surrounded by super blocks in the sense that there's no through access. So we've been trying hard to design the site to have some way of pedestrians to cut across without having to go around the whole block to get to a front entrance of the community center. Also, the developments to the north and west will one day be, high-rise buildings, as you can see them marching down New York Avenue. But the neighborhood to the south of the site is essentially small residential buildings. Next. So here you can see that context. There are a lot of industrial uses that were planned around this building. So this is actually a brownfield. So we have to be very careful. There's a lot of investigation going on right now as to how that will be dealt with, especially on this site. Next. There are a lot of on-site and off-site, improvements that need to be done. One is the sidewalks themselves, like along Oakey Street, which borders the northern edge of the site, there's no curb and people pull in perpendicular to the street. On Gallaudet Street, the sidewalk is uneven and too narrow, and there are light poles going through the sidewalk. So a complete new sidewalk and curb design has to be done around the whole site, and we've been working with DOT to do that. Next. The site slopes from the northeast corner to the southwest corner by approximately 13 feet. And so, you know, I'm just trying to turn on my video, sorry.
It's fine, just keep presenting.
All right, so
See the plans, that's the most important thing.
So you can see that there's also an existing curb cut off of Kendall Street, which we are going to try to keep. And because the site slopes to the south, to the southwest corner, we are going to try and put the stormwater management ponds over there. Next.
Hi, this is Sarah Vonish again with Traceries. Traceries has been working with this team in the development of the project, so I'm just going to walk through a brief history of the building, and then we'll touch a little bit more on the existing conditions and the proposed preservation scope of work as part of this project. So here's a quick timeline of the school. As mentioned, it was built between 1910 and 11. And in 1932, an addition was added to the rear of the school. The property was listed in the DC Inventory of Historic Sites and the National Register of Historic Places between 2002 and 2003 for its architectural significance and as an important focal point within the Ivy City community. And we can go to the next slide. The Crummell School was constructed to the design of architect Snowden Ashford, replacing an earlier and insufficient frame building that had served the neighborhood's predominantly African-American residents since 1896. And this was one of Ashford's earliest school building designs after he was appointed the municipal architect of DC, the first municipal architect in 1909. His initial designs for the two-story elementary school diverged slightly from the then standard 8-classroom pinwheel design, and instead included 4 classrooms at the first floor, and then 2 classrooms and a meeting hall at the second. His design was inspired by the eclectic Elizabethan Revival style, which he favored before the colonial revival style became the city's city standard for public school designs. The building's named for Reverend Alexander Crummell. Crummell was an important clergyman, educator, and abolitionist in the 19th century. He founded the American Negro Academy, which was the first organization in the United States to support African-American scholarship, academic scholarship, so appropriately named. And then in 1932, it was expanded with a 2-story addition encompassing that second floor meeting hall I mentioned in order to address overcrowding of the school. The expansion is attributed to the work of the Ivy City Citizens Association, which is important to note. The group strongly advocated for improvements to the school to better serve the needs of the community and its students. It had been founded in 1911, the year the school was completed, and was one of the first community organizations of its kind in the city, and continues to be an important advocate for the area. Despite the addition of several temporary annex buildings on the site in the 1940s especially, the school was unable to keep up with increasing enrollment and was ultimately closed and vacated in 1977. Next. And you can go to the next one. Thank you. So before we get into the existing conditions, just wanted to show you some of the original plans. And here are Ashford's original designs. And you can also see where that 1932 addition encompassed that second floor meeting hall space. The floor plan, which remains intact today, features a pinwheel layout with a central hall framed by 2 staircases. The basement level originally contained auxiliary rooms and play spaces. The first floor contained 4 classrooms, a library, and a teacher's room. And then the second floor, in addition to that meeting hall, had 2 classrooms. Next slide. I can start my video as well. Here's a section through the building. Again, you can see that main hall and the flanking stairs. The south stair on the left connects the first floor with the basement level, while the north stair on the right connects all floors in the building. Like other schools from the period, the design features 2 entrances, one for boys on the north elevation and then one for girls on the south. You'll also note in this section the central octagonal cupola on the roof, which helped ventilate the building, but is no longer extant. Next. As you might expect, after 50 years of sitting vacant, the interior is in overall very poor condition, and water infiltration has severely compromised the building. The interior is structurally compromised in almost all of its historic fabric, including the wood sash windows, plaster walls and ceilings. Doors and wood moldings are deteriorated beyond repair. In the upper left-hand image, you can see the condition of the north stair, which is actually in slightly better condition than the south stair, which has been condemned as unsafe and requires replacement. The lower left image is a second floor classroom where the ceilings have collapsed, and you can kind of see through the framing up and through the roof to the light, which has exacerbated the deterioration on the interior. The upper right-hand image is of a first floor classroom. The fabric on the first floor is actually in a little bit better condition, and you can see some of the original plaster walls, ceilings, and then the wood trim, including blackboards. And finally, on the lower right, you can see what's left of those original wood sash windows. Next. Exterior is in similarly poor condition, a lot of missing elements that have been taken away over time. The building is clad in a red brick. It features limestone tile details, as well as tile at the frieze below the cornice, and then stucco accents, and it's topped by a metal cornice. Much of the building is covered by ivy and other vegetation, and just with the vacancy, with the lack of use, it's the materials underlying the ivy are damaged and elements are missing. Next. The building will require significant repair to return it to use. The exterior preservation scope will include cleaning, repair, and restoration of masonry elements, repair of those porticos at the entrances on the north and south elevation entries, removal of the CMU at openings, reconstruction of the hipped roof and cupola and a dormer window based on the historic drawings that we have, replacement of windows with new aluminum clad windows to match the historic configuration, restoration or recreation of the transom windows above the entrances, and then replacement of missing cornices as needed. Next slide. On the interior, the pinwheel configuration of the first floor plan will be maintained, and also one of the first floor classrooms have been reserved to be restored to match the historic appearance. Additionally, the glass and metal screens at the stairs, you can see in that right-hand image, will be restored in both stairwells. Otherwise, the school will need to be modernized, and many of the finishes that have been deteriorated beyond repair will require replacement. And then I'll turn it back over to the architects.
Thank you. We've sent you a narrative about the design, but we can move into the next slide to show you the basic planning. So you can see the site utilization is based on the existing context as well as the site, features. So the yellow in the middle is the existing building. We want to keep at least one of the courts, basketball courts, and add to the existing playground. This is something the community wanted. We had this playground on Oakey Street, but because the kids that live in the neighborhood are to the south, so they requested it be moved to Gallaudet Street. As I talked about, the lowest point being reserved for stormwater management. The community wanted a small garden for vegetables, and also the idea of having a dual entry into a addition that would be adjacent to the school, because we expect the neighborhood to grow actually to the north and west and east of the site, and also provide some accessible parking from the existing parking curb cut. And also they want a big multi-purpose field that has to be fairly level for soccer or whatever kids want to play there. Next. So that site configuration, we've been developing landscape plans. So Bruno, if you have a minute. Are you on?
Yeah, I'm right here. Bruno Carvella with CGLA. I'm the project landscape architect. You can see the rendered version of the site plan, with the historic building being the main focus of the design, and everything revolves around that, with the courts and playgrounds to the right. Directly above that, we're introducing a community green to invite people into the space. So the space is not only used as a recreational area, but also as a passive area. The extension to the buildings to the left and around that, as Suman said, bioretention. There's a couple of heritage trees to the bottom left that we're preserving. Community green, the community garden, and your parking service area up on the upper left corner. And then, as she pointed out before as well, we're having to reconfigure some of the streetscapes around our site so that there are contiguous sidewalks, opportunities for street trees, and just generally improving the urban condition of our edges so that we fit better and stronger with our context.
So one thing I might add is that we're not going to, so far, we're not going to fence off the site. And the only fencing will be around the existing fencing modified around the basketball court, and of course around the low fence that's required around the playground. And so it'll give community members to be able to traverse the site in a north-south direction on two different through accesses. The other thing about this is because of the slopes, we had to, and the steps into the existing building, we decided to put the main entrance, accessible entrance into the addition. Next.
I mean, these are just some precedent images showing, some of the ideas and visualization of some of these spaces. We're going to have a splash pad and fields, more passive areas, gardens. I think this will be a very dynamic site.
Also on the site, we want to incorporate signage and displays that talk about the history of the Crummell School. So here is the design of how the extension of the existing to the existing building works. We have a dual entrance we talked about. The building is set back from the historic Crummell School, the new addition, and is divided into 3 parts to make it less massive, a lower connector building, and a taller gymnasium and fitness to the north. Next. So the 2 stairs that currently are in the building do not meet fire code. So we are obligated to add a new fire stair, which we are going to do to the west of the building in order not to disturb the courts that are there. And at the right code compliant fire stair at the right distance from the existing stairs. By the way, both stairs serve, historic stair serves all the floors in the historic building. And we've chosen a place in the elevation that disturbs the elevation in a very limited area, as well as in an area that doesn't have those very beautiful large windows. It's the school. Next. Here you can see the floor plan of the existing building. The pink walls that are shown in the historic building are all bearing, and so we are keeping them all. And then using the most of the usable spaces, except the ones that are pointed out in gray, colored in gray, in the historic building, which currently are being used for bathrooms and mechanical spaces. And there's also, this dotted line which has a coal cellar, which we're going to use for mechanical, but the rest of the floors will be active uses, which the community is still determining what they are. You can see the entrance into the historic new addition, which has a large community space that the community wants, a very flexible kind of meeting and gathering, multi-generational. From this space, which is colored in yellow, you'll be able to go to the gymnasium, which is to the west, with a small foyer in front of it, and then you can go back towards the fitness center with a very simple circulation, and then you can also enter the center from the north through another vestibule into the addition. Next. The upper floors of the building, this is the first floor, will be will retain, but because the bearing walls are where they are, mainly everything in the historic building will be the pinwheel design. But in on this particular floor, we will be recreating, restoring the center hall, which has coffered ceilings, and then reconstructing at least one of the corner classrooms with the blackboard and all the things that were there when the school was a school. And then the rest of the spaces will be used to, for classrooms, art, senior lounge, administration, by the community center. Next. On the 3rd floor, we are, putting in the community room, which is a large gathering space. And so the stair to the south will not extend up into this space. And the community also wanted a large demonstration kitchen put in here. And we have added the elevator access in the historic building because the addition is only 1 story. So whereas the bearing walls are there, none of the structure is there, like the floor framing, roof framing, everything's gone. Back you can see daylight through the roof. So we'll be reframing the entire historic building. Next. There will be, as Andrew said, we'll put back the cupola. The chimney is still there, and we'll also put back the dormer to the south. And we're using the rooftop of the new addition to have for a green roof and solar ready. And make the gymnasium room solar ready. And then we created a depression in the slab, in the roof elevation to house the mechanical system. But we've been talking to the engineers, we may need more space than that. So we might have to use the rooftop of the fitness center with a higher parapet. That option we can show you because there's really no flat roof, usable flat roof on the historic building. Next. So on where it says south elevation, that's the entrance from Gallaudet Street. We've done a solar study and we are showing the solar shading, appropriate solar shading on all four sides of the building. You can see the addition, the historic building and the narrow addition, which is all glass, which attaches to the historic building. And then the lower level is where it says Cromel, is where that connector is. The gymnasium is to the west of that. And on the north elevation, you can see the other, I think that was the boys' entrance, I think, in the historic building. And we worked with Andrew to move all the masses out from, obstructing any view of the historic building, even from Oakey Street. And so you can see the fitness center directly in the middle, and then the gymnasium to the back, to the west, and the new glass addition vestibule that'll serve as the second entrance. So these are the side views, and we are using a material which is like wood grain metal that will be used in a checkerboard pattern, and the rest of the addition will just be a profile metal as well. And then next slide, please. So here you can see the section east-west, which shows you that the height of the gymnasium, the height of the fitness center that currently stands, and then the depression for the DOAS units. But as I said, we're still working on that. And then the stair addition to the back. Next slide. So this is the perspective view of what the scale of the new addition will be and how the historic building will appear. So, and it's a building in the round, so we've kept all four sides of the building basically free, except for where we had to connect to the new forest. And then the rear, the other entrance is here. Of course, based on this a little bit older rendering, because we moved the playground next to the basketball courts closer to Gallaudet as the community wanted. Next. So here are some pictures that show you what the materials might look like. To the left is the profile metal that we want to use, and it comes in many colors, and some of them are custom. You can get them, and we've used this on many recreation centers. It's, you know, it's not completely graffiti free, but easy to clean and very durable. And we want to match the color of the brick, and that would be the predominant material. In the middle, you can see the you know, type of shading we want to use, which will be wood grain, and then also kind of to break down the mass a little further, use a sort of checkerboard pattern of a darker wood and a lighter wood next to each other on the end walls. Next. That's it for us.
All right. Thank you. Any questions from board members?
Chair, just a quick one for Andrew Lewis. This wasn't a school, so it didn't go before Commission of Fine Arts, or did it go before CFA?
It did go before CFA, I believe, Gretchen. Let me double check. But CFA staff have been reviewing the project, and perhaps Suman, you may know off the top of your head whether.
Yes. So it did go through one CFA review, and since that time, Andrew and CFA staff have been working with us to you know, adjust the massing, so it has to go back.
Ms. Storr, could you summarize the you mentioned just now the massing, but could you summarize some of the comments that the CFA had? I ask only because I know they do a review and we do a review. They have a slightly different purview than we do, but I'd like to try to avoid any conflicts for you if I can.
Yeah, they basically, you know, wanted, when we showed them the design, the building was more attached to the historic building on the west and north side. It was actually covering, you know, physically attached. So everybody felt that it should, we shouldn't be attaching to the historic building except for where it's absolutely needed. And this, so we created this narrow hyphen to that's the glass of the stair. And the also comments were the height of the building. So these buildings were much taller, and so we've been working with everyone to lower the heights. And for example, in the connector, it was 2 stories. It was a mezzanine, so we took that out. The other comments from CFA were on the site plan. You know, they were interested in a landscape design, a revised landscape design that would work with what's happening on the inside of the building. And so there were, but basically moving the mass away from the historic building and lowering the heights.
Thank you, that's helpful. I appreciate it.
So, hi, Matt Bell here. A question about this view. So what happens when this building turns the corner? Could you describe it looks like it's 2 different materials there. I heard some reference to it, but a little clarity would be helpful.
Yeah, so on the you know, solar louvers that we have will be wood grain metal. And so the end wall, which you could see a checkerboard pattern, will be wood grain metal. So material is the same, it's metal, and then there'll be just 2 different colors of wood that will be in a checkerboard pattern that that reflect the lines of the building that actually follow the lines of the historic sill and head heights of the existing windows. So that's what's planned.
So what do you gain by turning the corner and going to the checkerboard? What's the big idea there?
Well, because I think it helps to not have just a very, boxy buildings just around the school. And then the other reason was we, wanted more of a wood feel to it, because that's like more animated by the landscape than it is by anything else. So it was a way to also break down the height of the existing building in a more graphic way.
Okay. And that checkerboard pattern occurs again on the end wall of the studio. Is that right?
Yeah, it occurs wherever. So if you think of it as like rectangles, so the long sides are glass and and then the short sides are the wood.
But then we're also seeing it at that entry piece.
Right.
Yes, that's the one, Andrew, you're talking about. I'm okay with that not being, I think that would be fine. Maybe it would be better if it's just the red metal. But what you're seeing in sort of is, if you go to the elevations, it might be more useful to see.
But there's no brick, right? There's no brick.
No,
Okay.
no. So if you see that the vestibule, which is on the east elevation, you can see the new vestibule with all glass. So that little area of wood we can take out. I'm okay with that. Actually, we had to expand the vestibule, so it's actually more glass than it was before. And the doors of the historic building were wood, so we want to, there was, a feeling of warmth at the, on the facade of warmer wood material.
So what you were trying to avoid, was it just having a long blank facade?
Yeah, I mean there's it's like a limited budget, so this building, for example, there's 21,000 gross square feet in the existing building, which just garners about 13,000 of net square feet, and it's super expensive per square foot to fix this building, historic building. The site is contaminated and has a huge slab on it, so there's a lot of off-site work. So we really need to be very careful and judicious about how much glass we use, as it affects everything, the mechanical system, etc. So yeah, we wanted to make it a more interesting facade wherever we don't have glass. And this area here, if you look at the landscape plan, is right up against the designed to be able to have sort of a community garden and a green buffer between the Oakey Street between Oakey Street and the community center.
Did you talk at all about possibly having one or some, I guess one of those surfaces looks like it could be more ideal for a mural. Did you explore something like that possibly?
Yes, we have a budget for artwork on the project, and you know, that can certainly be done. I mean, it's a large wall, but that's definitely certain places, a place to have public art.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, we do have a few people who have registered to testify. So we can come back to questions from the board after testimony. I will first ask if Sabrina Rhodes, representing ANC 5DO2, is on the line.
Yes, I'm here.
All right, perfect. You can make your statement. And I believe, are there two other people
Yes.
who are wishing to testify as well?
Yes. And Andrew.
Okay, all right. You all can proceed.
I will start. Yeah, my name is.
If you could speak closer to wherever your mic is, because you sound very faint, that would be helpful.
Okay, let me.
It just sounds like you're far away from the.
I kind of was.
Okay, that's
Can you
better.
hear me better now?
That is better, yes.
Great. Okay, my name is Sabrina Rhodes. I'm a community organizer with Empower DC, as well as the ANC commissioner here in Ivy City. I'm also a member of Friends of Cromell and a native Washingtonian. As we all know, Cromell has been sitting vacant since the 70s, boarded up and abandoned. And we are pleased to know that the Cromell School will now be a community/recreation center, something we all have fought for many years. While listening to the presentation, I was going to go through some other things while listening to the presentation. We would like to know the CFA results in our next community meeting. And will the glass, which we didn't get a chance to ask, will the glass affect the temperature inside the building? Because we suffer from an urban heat island effect here in Ivy City. And with the new green space that we're going to have on the site, will all the glass affect the temperature inside the building? So that's just something that I want to add. We have had a chance to meet with the architect SOAR, which we appreciate, and with DPR, DGS, and other agencies such as the Office of Planning, the Council Member's Office, Councilmember Parker's office, and the Mayor's office, who are all engaged in watching this project very closely. And we do appreciate our voices being heard. On November 29th, our community meeting was enlightening and engaging. We were able to finally see what's to come. The revisions made and we were told by Tommy Jones that as the projects move along, we would know if or if not, there's more money that will be needed in the budget. While going over the plans for the designs, we were told about saving some of the historic features inside the building, which was mentioned in some of the testimony here. We will have the splash pad, the fitness center, multi-purpose room, solar. We do have a question about the splash pad because the soil is toxic. We have questions about how the splash pad will be constructed and the water from the pipes. Where is the water coming from and where would the pipes be? Will it be underground or will you have a raised splash pad, or how is that going to work? And through wear and tear, because the soil is toxic, is there some kind of way that the toxic soil will seep through the splash pad? Also, we want more, if possible, if the multi-purpose field can be smaller, so that we can have more covered, like a gazebos, covered seating, park benches, because we would like to have that closer to the splash pad. So when the parents come on the site, that they can sit there, and if it's like 150 degrees outside, they have a covered area to sit at while watching the children play on the splash pad. So we're wondering if part of the field can be smaller and have more of a covered gazebo area. And as far as the multi-purpose field, we wasn't sure if there was going to be grass or turf, depending on the budget. But because the soil is toxic, we're concerned about the materials that's being used on the multi-purpose field as well. And do normal wear and tear when children are playing on the field, will any of that toxic soil, will it be something in between the turf or grass and the toxic soil? And, you know, as the years go on, will the toxic from the soil seep through the turf or the grass on a multi-purpose field? Will the toxic soil hurt any of the plants and the trees? What type of trees we're going to have, and will they last a lifetime, or will they be trees that will be damaged by the toxic soil? And also, let me see. Also, we're hoping that the 35 million in the budget will cover all of the costs of the renovation. And I know I'm just leave that part out about the pickleball. But also we want to know if we can have air quality monitors on the site, on the outside of the site, as well as inside of the historic building. We're happy that one of the classrooms will be renovated so that it can have that historic look from back in the day. That's awesome. But we just want to make sure that any of the materials that's being used, because of the $35 million budget, they will be sustainable. They'll be sustainable through weather and wear and tear. And SORD let us know that part of the maintenance will come out of the budget. So we're concerned that, well, we want to make sure that the maintenance is being done all the time, every year. We don't want it to stop. We want this to be a site for the Ivy City residents, but we want to know, or I want to know, if there will be an area where we can have some kind of trail to Union Market. So when we do have activities and events between Ivy City and Union Market, that both communities are able to come together. And also we are happy, and I'm sure Alexander Camille will be happy, that this is going to happen. Finally, we're fighting for the same thing that the community has fought for millions of years. But over 100 years. So we are happy with the design. We just have those few questions. We also have Brenda Ingram and Anjanette Willis, who they went to Carmel, and they would like to make a couple of comments. Thank you for allowing me to testify.
You're welcome. Thank you. We'll hear from them now. I assume they're in the same room with you on the same mic.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. They can keep going.
Good morning. My name is Brenda Ingram. I've lived in Ivy City since 1965 and went to Carmel. I am happy to see the plans for the renovation, along with having a classroom renovated to look like it did when I went there. We want to make sure that the Carmel School is the highlight of the site which the architects promised it would be. I know that everything will not look the same as it did when I went to the school, but knowing that DPR, DGS, and the architects will maintain the history of the site will make me and my Cornell alumni pleased. Thank you for allowing me to add my comments. Brenda Ingram.
Good morning, Historic Preservation Review Board. My name is Antoinette Willis. I am a longtime resident of Ivy City, born and raised. I went to Cromwell in the 1960s. We all want the 2 acres of the Cromwell site along with the Cromwell School to have an historic feel and look. Our wish is that there's careful selection of the materials and the grounds to be kept properly. We want shade trees and materials that will last for many years to come. When we walk into Cromwell, we want to see and feel historic. Ivy City is a historic neighborhood, and so is Cromwell. Some aspects of the school will be modern, but we want to make sure our history is preserved. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you. Thank you all. We appreciate your time and testimony today.
Chair
Any
Heath,
questions for them?
I just have 2 comments for the last 2 women that spoke. I had the fortune of working on a project in Loudoun County. It's the Frederick Douglass High School. It's the only African-American high school in Loudoun County. But they may want to get in contact with that alumni group to talk to them about how they were able to integrate in some of the history and stories and details of their day-to-day activities, what they did at the school, because as the applicants said, they're looking to do signage and integrate in information. And different than Loudoun County, DC has grants through the humanities group for stories and histories like this. So maybe finding out how that group is organized and how they put their plan together to make sure, because in that project in Loudoun County, and maybe it's worth a road trip out there, they have an exhibit that talks about the history of the school members that attended the school, the kinds of activities that happened there, and the names of the attendees. So there's this history that's living as a part of the future for that school. And so maybe contacting that school group and their alumni group might be helpful. And looking for a grant from DC Humanities to help fund the activity might help that be realized and not just discussed in a presentation like today about signage on the site and having the history of the school be a part of the actual experience of the school.
That sounds great. We'll have to get that information.
I will be glad to provide, if you contact Mr. Lewis, I'll be glad to provide that information to him so he could share it with you if that's helpful.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for coming today.
One other thing in that regard, when my firm designed the Deanwood Community Center, there was a big outreach to the community about including the history of Deanwood there, and there were special cases put in the main sort of foyer of the building to be able to accommodate things that the community could use to memorialize the history of the neighborhood. I don't know what the status of this is now, but it's not, I don't think, I think DPR has been very accommodating of those sorts of things by community residents. Can be done.
And I remember SOAC saying that we will have a special area for the history of Cromwell and Ivy City.
Okay. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Okay. We're going to proceed to the next person who's signed up to testify. That's Reverend Gail Fisher Stewart.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, and thank you for this opportunity. As was says, I'm Gail Fisher Stewart, and I'm the president of the Alexander Crummell Anna Julia Cooper chapter of the Union of Black Episcopalians and a member of the Friends of Crummell. Before my retirement, I was the pastor at St. Luke's Episcopal Church located at 1514 15th Street Northwest. St. Luke's was also my childhood church. I grew up in St. Luke's. St. Luke's was the vision of the Reverend Dr. Alexander Crummell. Through his efforts, the church was planned, designed, funded, and built by Black people. It was the first independent Black Episcopal church in the District of Columbia. Calvin Stowe Brent, DC's first Black architect, designed the church. Crummell was the first pastor, rector of St. Luke's, and since Thanksgiving Day, 1879, when the first service was held in its sanctuary, the church has been actively in use, and its members continue to worship in the very building envisioned and built by Alexander Crummell. The church is historic and it is history. As has been heard, history is important. At a time when certain elements of our society want to deny Black history, destroy Black history, tell us we have no history worth preserving and telling, in other words, to deny us as a people, it is important that the Alexander Crummell School tells the story through the building. That when the people of Ivy City enter, not only do they have a modernized building that meets their needs, they also step into history. They are able to feel the ancestors who attended the school and the one for whom the school is named. That they are able to experience the building as those who attended the school experienced it. That they feel and see the history of Black people in their historically Black community. Therefore, to the extent possible, given the current condition of the building, please preserve the historic elements inside and outside. Preserve the history of the people of Ivy City. Current and future generations will thank you.
I feel like saying amen, but thank you, Reverend. We really appreciate you taking the time to testify and speak to us today. Preserving the
Thank you.
history is incredibly important. We agree. So thank you for sharing that message.
Thank you.
Any questions for the Reverend?
Just I said amen with my mute on.
Oh, okay.
But just to offer the same contact information for a successful project. And then maybe also, Matt, if you have a contact for Deanwood, we could offer both of those to Andy Lewis to send to the Reverend and the community members that were testifying if they're interested in it. Just because it was a successful solution in both cases at various different scales. It might be useful for them.
We're interested. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Gretchen. All right. The next person that I have is Parisa from Empower DC. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for holding this hearing today. I'm happy to be with you. My name is Parisa Naruzi, and I'm the co-founder and executive director of the citywide grassroots organization Empower DC, through which I've worked with residents from all 8 wards to advance racial, economic, and environmental justice for the past 2 decades. I'm very happy to be here today to speak in support of the renovation plan for Ivy City's historic Alexander Crummell School. Overall, we feel that the design meets the needs and expectations of the Ivy City community in their decades-long quest to reclaim the school and honor this important site. We do also support the recommendations. I had the opportunity to review testimony by the DC Preservation League, which pointed out a few ideas for improvements to the plan, including addressing some of the proximity of the new additions to the historic structure, maximizing the usable space on the site, and restoring historic elements. The plan that we saw today has some changes, so perhaps some of those things were already incorporated. And I also noticed there was some changes based on the community meeting around the location of the splash pad, et cetera. So I thank you for continuing to reflect what you're hearing from the community. There's a few things that Sabrina mentioned that, you know, we do want to talk a little bit more about gathering spaces on the site, potentially a little bit more of an opportunity for people to walk, you know, some type of trail around the site, and just making sure that the gathering places are available to people. I think that that will be a very important function of the site, you know, community events, celebrations, and making sure that residents and parents can, you know, have a place to sit in the shade as they're watching their kids. And I think we do need to also follow up on the conversation of the perimeter and the fencing, and just make sure that we're balancing the need to have openness with the need to have security, and you know, make sure that the kids are safe, etc. So we'll talk more about that, I'm sure. I did want to just put on the record today some reflections on this journey to get here, which I've been involved in for 22 years. I've had the great pleasure, and it has taught me so much in my life, to work with the Ivy City community and Crummell School alumni to elevate their calls for the Alexander Crummell School, the cherished heart of Ivy City, to be restored for public use and enjoyment. For all this time, the community has been very clear in their vision that the school reopening is not only for recreational purposes, but also to provide accessible programs and services to uplift and improve the lives of area residents, very much in keeping with the legacy of Reverend Alexander Crummell. Ivy City, as you know, is one of DC's most historic Black communities, founded in 1873. And the entire history of the community is one of having to fight for every service and amenity, and regularly oppose or combat environmental injustices due to systemic racism. This working class community has never had the support of DC's political elite, but its own civic leaders, such as Perry Carson in the late 1800s and Lewis Crowe in the 1940s to 60s, elevated the needs not only of their community, but of all working class Black residents of Washington, D.C. It is fitting that they pushed to name their school after the noted abolitionist colleague of Frederick Douglass and father of Pan-Africanism, Reverend Alexander Crummell. The last time I came before the HPRB in reference to Crummell School was in May of 2002. When I supported the then Ivy City Citizens Association with their historic nomination, and helped to rally in its support. It was a momentous day when the board approved the landmark designation, as prior to that designation, the Crummell alumni and residents involved thought for sure that their beloved school was destined for demolition. The DC government had used the site for an auto auction where people would purchase cars, take the parts that they wanted, and dump the rest in the neighborhood. They used it to house trailers that served as nighttime sleeping quarters for homeless men. The residents and I soon learned that despite historic landmark designation, the fight to restore Crummell was an uphill battle. We testified and advocated at DC Council not only for the site to be designated a community center, but against demolition by neglect. It's amazing how difficult it was to secure the most basic stabilization measures for the school, like a temporary roof. For years, the roof and windows were left completely open to the elements, severely deteriorating the interior of the site. I won't go into details about the last 22 years of work that it took to get us to this place. Over 4 mayoral administrations, well over 200 community meetings, countless testimonies, efforts to prevent the site from being declared surplus and disposed of on a few occasions, a lawsuit to stop a polluting bus terminal being located there, and finally, a campaign to prevent the site from becoming luxury housing. I'd like to share my appreciation for everyone who has supported this effort over the years, and particularly name a few people. Miss Romaine Thomas, Crummell School alumna who later also taught at the school, and she actually served on the HPRB at the time that the site was designated historic. Miss Remetter C. Freeman, an alumna of the school, graduated in 1942, who remained very active for many years in this effort and would be here today if she could. Mr. R.V. Parks, now deceased, who was the president of the Ivy City Citizens Association, who led the designation effort and also brought me into this fight in 2001. And other alumna, residents, and supporters who've been part of this effort, Miss Daisy Roten, another alumna who's passed, Miss Brenda Ingram and Ann Willis, who you heard from today, Miss Reverend Gail Fisher-Stewart, who you heard from today, the DC Preservation League, and many youth from the community, such as Antoine Williams, Percy Williams, Marcus, Sean, Tony, and Erica Cruz, Maya Stuckey, and so many others. It is a prime example of racial injustice that it has taken this long for the city to do right by Ivy City. There are countless people whose lives could have been improved had the site been restored earlier. In the words of Alexander Crummell, all real success springs from that inward might which we might exert upon society. Today, we benefit from that inward might of so many Ivy City residents who exerted their vision to improve life for themselves and others upon our society. Let us always stay true to that vision. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions from the board? Any questions? All right. And the last person that I have registered is Rebecca Miller. We'll have Rebecca come back.
Great, thank you. Good morning again. My name is Rebecca Miller. I'm the Executive Director of the DC Preservation League. I'm a little choked up by Paris's testimony. I think that she summed it up very, very well, the challenges that this community has faced on fighting for this particular community center in this school that means so much to them. So I think you all, I thank her for her comments, and I hope you all take those to heart, and I hope the city takes those to heart. The Preservation League has been involved with this building for nearly two decades as well. It has been one of Washington, D.C.'s most endangered places. And we hope that this blighted building proves a lesson to the city that the continued neglect of its publicly owned historic resources only exacerbates the technical and financial challenges of rehabilitation and restoration. If the city had focused on this building 20 years ago, it would not cost the $35 million that it costs today. So I really hope that DGS and DPR hear this, that they speak to the mayor's office about this, that they cannot continue to ignore their historic resources across the city, because it just continues to cost the taxpayer more and more money as it goes. So in general, DCPL's Project Review Committee met with the team behind the design. And in general, we find the proposal is sympathetic to the historic fabric and the context of the building. But we do have a few comments that may lead to refinements in the design. On the east side of the site, the existing basketball court with its attendant fence stands uncomfortably close to the facade of the building. Understanding the desire to retain the existing court, moving the court a few feet east would have relatively little impact on the site plan, would let the building sit more comfortably on its site, and would ease circulation through the site, and would simplify maintenance of the structure. The committee recommends widening the path to at least 10 feet. Number two, the connection between the school and the addition to the west needs refinement. On the north side of the building, there is an 8-foot wide slot between the two structures, creating a non-functional exterior space on the site where every inch is valuable to the community. And as stated at the, in not so architectural terms, it was referred to as either a leaf catcher or a P area. So the committee sees the solution as eliminating this narrow slot or widening it significantly. The addition could abut the building directly and be exposed within the new lobby space. Alternatively, the lobby area could be narrowed and the hyphen between the buildings lengthened to create a more visually distinct separation between the two buildings. Particularly given the stylistic differences between the two buildings, a wider separation would seem the more preferred option. It would also appear possible to reorganize the lobby space to place the main north and south entries to the addition within the hyphen, creating a visual porosity and simplifying circulation within the space. DCPL recommends this hyphen should be around 20 feet wide rather than the 8 feet currently marked on the plans. Reducing the number of support functions within the school building, toilets, mechanicals, etc., will make it possible to retain the historic pinwheel plan in more portions of the building. As possible, locate the support functions in the attic or in the new addition. The committee also suggests using the recreated cupola as a vent for the building as it was originally used. The presentation indicated the historic wood windows, which are too deteriorated for use, will be replaced with wood-clad aluminum windows. Exterior clad wood windows are generally preferred in historic structures where maintenance is a concern. Also, although only a single classroom is proposed for recreation, DCPL recommends using historic trim around the windows throughout the building. DCPL appreciates the design team's work on addressing the historic preservation and the community programming needs and looks forward to the irreplaceable landmark returning to productive use. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for your testimony. Any questions from the board? All right. Then at this time, we'll turn back to the applicant to respond to any of the comments or requests that you heard. Do we still have?
I just wanted to say that we continue to listen and work with the community members and with Preservation League and everybody else. And so as we've started showing some of the changes, like the moving of the playground, we heard about the widening of the walkway between the courts and the school, and we're working to do that. We've started widening the space between the historic building and the new addition on the west facade. And so we definitely want to keep working to have what we've been hearing from everyone. The concerns on the site are really important. Right now, we are conducting a phase 2, waiting to conduct a phase 2 environmental assessment. So just to be clear, there's not environmental, there's not toxic soil everywhere. So we're trying to figure out where it is and how to contain it. And so everything that be done on the site will take into consideration the soil condition and where the contamination and how it be mitigated. We're also working with the archaeologist to figure out when the archaeology investigation will happen, because we have to remove this very wide slab. And we are very interested in the programming of the artwork and commemorative work inside and outside on the site. So there are a lot of sort of constraints on the slope, etc., to get everybody into this building. So we're working to improve the pathways and entry and use of the exterior.
Okay. Any final questions for the applicant from the board before we deliberate? All right. Then I'll ask the board members to turn on your cameras. Would anyone like to start?
I will if you'd like.
Okay, go ahead.
I think the DCPL recommendations summarize the design comments that I have. I have a little bit of concern about the cladding and matching the brick. I think the brick behaves differently when it's wet and dry.
Turn
and
right
it's
onto
hard
M
to-
Street Northwest,
hard to-
then turn right onto 23rd Street Northwest.
I'll let somebody turn.
Want you to get lost.
I think that those materials behave very differently in different weather and temperature
In a
and
quarter
light.
mile, turn
So I
right
think
onto
it's
New Hampshire Avenue Northwest.
not possible to match that. I feel like this edition is sort of neither fish nor fowl. It needs to either be different or not, and it's a little bit distracting that it's trying to be contextual, but it's not. So I agree with the comments about the site plan and the details that DCPL provided, and I would have said the same summary essentially.
Okay. Yeah, I agree that it is trying to be contextual, but not, with the exception of the checkerboard pattern, which to me is not contextual at all and quite distracting.
Yeah.
I think yeah, I would agree with DCPL's comments as well, and um, and yours too, Gretchen.
It's kind of a matter of scale. Like there's large window openings and large banded windows that are very different scale. So the materials are similar, but it doesn't take enough cues from the scale or rhythm of the adjacent building to work, I think.
I agree with some of this, but I have a slightly different perspective. If you look at the building and as it sits on the site, it's very much this cubic mass that dominates everything around it, right? It's a very simple sort of mass defined thing, you know, you can't avoid it. And parked in the middle of the site. And it's very impressive that way. You know, there's a number of DC schools of this period that were done like that. And first of all, I should say that I appreciate very much that this school is coming back to life and will be offering something of consequence to the community. And it sounds to me like it's been far too long in coming. And so seeing it, you know, on the precipice of getting moving with bulldozers and things is a good thing. I think that the there are some things about it that Gretchen said she doesn't think it's neither fish nor fowl. I kind of agree with that, but I have a slightly different reason for thinking so. Um, One of the things that this approach does is it develops a very kind of modernist approach in that it changes material per surface. In other words, you know, instead of the gymnasium having a unified material and things, one side of the gym has one material and the other side has another material, and then the community piece in the back does the same thing. And I find that it's a little bit distracting, but I think it would be probably okay if it was more consistent. In other words, if the gym was all the checkerboard pattern and clearly was distinct as something from the other pieces, then you could say, well, its massing might be like the existing school in that it's you know, you can see the four sides of it defined, but its articulation is different because what the scheme does is it adopts a very almost kind of Gestalt sort of attitude to surface, where you're always seeing things on the oblique and you're changing materials as you go around corners and things like that, which I think is introducing a different kind of language into the complex. And you know, I think the design team's trying to compensate for their sort of massing and the way the building pieces attach to each other by having some colored similarities between the existing building and what they're proposing. So I wonder if things could be simplified by taking more of a consistent attitude to the pieces, like the gym and the community piece, and doing less of and seeing them almost analogous to a contemporary version of the old school itself, but that they might be articulated more simply and more completely and more continuously, and not changing things as you go around the corner. I think that's what I find distracting, particularly in the perspectives. I can understand where maybe the gym might be the checkerboard pattern, the whole thing, or it might be all the other material, but having it be both of them to me makes it very confusing. The second thing, I think DCPL is right on about the closeness of the building to the existing building. I think that's got to be worked out a little bit there. I think there's an opportunity for some interesting design features there. And, you know, I think in height and in pulling away from the existing building, there are the right moves made. And it seems to me that most of the general disposition of it is okay. I think the actual articulation, the fitness recreation edition and the gym edition could learn more from the existing school by being simpler the way that school is. And I think that would really make the project much more coherent in addition to pulling it away from the school a little bit more, or attaching it more clearly. It's sort of not doing one or the other. You know, it does make that slot, which I think is probably going to be a problem no matter what. So that's sort of where I'm seeing it. I think they can make these kinds of adjustments and keep the program pretty much in place. And for me, it's a matter really of clarifying the surfaces and the massing ideas, and also the relationship of the addition to the existing building.
Yeah, I think I could see how that approach might work, to looking at differentiation based on massing rather than just surface. And so but I think hopefully with the applicant hearing the concerns of the board, in addition to the more discrete concerns of DCPL, which I think are easy things to rectify, hopefully the applicant can go back and make some revisions based on what they think might be the best approach, so as not to have us design from the dais. But I think we've made our concerns clear. I know you said, Matt, that maybe the checkerboard works if it was the entire gym. I would caution against that, just for the busyness that it creates and the distraction from the historic building. But I think, I'm certainly open to seeing what they'd come back with. I think generally, it sounds like the board is in support of the general massing and height, with some modifications to the proximity of the addition to the existing building. The changes here that we would like to see are relatively minor. Anything else?
I'm not sure they're minor, actually.
Okay.
I'm not sure they are, to tell you the truth. I mean, I think the question of the building's mass relationship to the existing building is a pretty significant thing. And I know we want to move this along. It's been a long time coming and all that. Like I said, I think the general locations of things seem to be fine. It's really the relationship of the massing and the articulation of the elements. And I think you said it well, when rather than articulating surface, maybe articulating program, might be one way to the block of the recreation piece versus the gymnasium and things. But I think those are, for my money, they're enough to warrant wanting to see this again.
Yes, and I wasn't suggesting they were minor in that we would not want to. I agree with that. I think we'd want to see this again.
I think we may even offer to do a less than a quorum meeting if the applicants wanted to do that.
Sure, if the applicant feels that that's helpful, you can talk to staff about helping to organize that prior to coming back to the board. But hopefully this can move along quickly in the interest of making sure that this project continues to move forward as quickly as possible, I'll say. All right. Thank you to the team and to everyone who has participated in helping to make this happen. We look forward to seeing it come back to us. All right, so we're ready to proceed with our next application, which is at 850 26th Street Northeast, Young, Brown, Phelps, and Spingarn Campus, Historic District.
Yes, good morning again, Madam Chair. I'll briefly introduce this project by stating that DC Public Schools and Department of General Services, along with Perkins Eastman and Ronnie McGee and Associate Architects, are proposing to modernize the Brown Education Campus by rehabilitating the historic school and replacing the 1970s gymnasium with a smaller facility. Brown is a contributing, as you just mentioned, a contributing element of the Young, Brown, Phelps, and Spingarn Educational Campus Historic District, which is one of the longest named historic districts ever, and also the Kingman Park Historic District, both of which are listed in the DC Inventory and the National Register. The school was designed by architect S.B. Walsh in the colonial revival style to complement the earlier Charles Young School, which was the first school built on the campus, and that was constructed in 1931. It was named in honor of the prominent Native Washingtonian educator, minister, and civil rights advocate Hugh M. Brown. The central core was constructed in 1932 and is the northernmost of all the schools in the historic district. And additions were constructed on the west in 37, on the south in 53. And as mentioned earlier, the gym was constructed on the north in 1970. The most notable component of the modernization project is the demolition of the large non-historic gym and the construction of the new smaller gym. Unlike Brown's earlier additions, which are considered historically significant, the 1970s gym projects several feet in front of the historic school rather than being set back at a respectful distance. The relatively steep slope does help to mitigate the size and scale of the gym, but it's still viewed as predominant due to its greater proximity to 26th Street, which runs in front of the historic district. By contrast, the proposed gym will be set back a few feet from the 1931 historic core and sited in the same plane as the 1950s addition to the south. A parapet will also be incorporated to replicate the height of the 50s addition, and the existing connector between the new gym and the original school will be modified to visually balance the design. Although some details of the interior and interior rehabilitation scope are still being refined, HPO supports the overall concept with the exception of the proposal to clad the connector in variegated fiber cement panels. I'd like to stress this because the use of traditional red brick is one of the most important unifying features of the entire historic district, and some additions that have been constructed in recent years have failed to match that very closely, and so we want to avoid anything of that nature happening again. Also, because the connector is a relatively minor component of the modernization project rather than a new entrance or any other element that warrants some sort of differentiation, HPO recommends that the connector also be clad in traditional red brick, like the new gym, or something that more closely matches the original materials. We also believe that it's very important for physical mock-ups of the new brick to be provided for approval prior to construction. Finally, we're looking to the board for any suggestions it may have to further refine or improve the design of the new gym. Otherwise, we recommend the board find the concept compatible with the historic districts which it's located in, and as described in the staff report, and delegate all remaining design review to HPO. And with that, I will turn it over to the project team for a more detailed presentation.
All right, thank you. We're waiting for you guys. We don't hear you. While we're waiting for the applicant, I will just state for the record that Board Member Bell is recusing himself from this case, so he will not be participating.
Are you able to hear us now?
Now we can, yes.
Okay. Apologies for the technical difficulties. I'm Christina Vidal with Perkins Eastman, and on behalf of our design build team that includes MCN Build and Ronnie McGee and Associates, we are pleased to present the Brown Modernization Project to the review board today. I'm not going to read through the agenda. We're going to kick off with a little bit of background information about project context and scope, which will tee up what we hope to be a productive discussion about the proposed addition. And then we'll wrap up our presentation with a summary of the historic preservation strategies and goals for the project. Next slide. So as Andrew made reference to, this building was built in the 1930s. It is based on one of the extensible school prototypes that was very common in the DC school building stock at the time. Brown also is significant because it came online in 32, which was a time when schools in DC were segregated. So Brown, unlike many of the prototypes, was actually always intended to serve an African-American student population. Significantly over time, both with changes in building size, but also in population. So originally opened as a junior high school, Brown now serves an education campus, which includes students in grades as young as preschool 3 all the way up through middle school grade 8. The modernization that we are working on is designed to serve about 500 students with a 100% enrollment capacity of 640 students, which comes nowhere close to filling the size that Brown's physical facilities are today. And because of that, our modernization has been asked to incorporate 2 strategies. One is the incorporation of a small child development center, and the other is to identify some space within the building that can be mothballed. So renovated up to a point and then left as a warm, dark shell for future partners to occupy. So the next 2 slides talk about siting. So we'll cover these very briefly. Brown is located in the northeast quadrant of DC. Nearby notable landmarks include the Langston Golf Course, which is literally across the street, the Anacostia River, and the National Arboretum. Next slide. Brown occupies a site on the east side of the Carver-Langston neighborhood, which is also heavily involved in DC's desegregation history. Slide. And as Andrew referenced, Brown is part of this historic site district, whose name I always have to look at my notes for, the Young, Brown, Phelps, and Spingarn Historic Site District. And it is the school at the northern part of the slide here. Next slide. So we like to incorporate aerials when we give presentations about Brown because the building is very long. So 26th Street, which is the major street frontage, is sort of page down in this view. And along 26th Street, Brown is nearly 500 feet long, which makes it very challenging to photograph. And also due to the grade change across the site, which is sort of highest in the back corner, sloping down to the northeast corner. One addition is in the next slide. Here we have a visual chronology of the building's growth over time. So in 32, the center portion of the building was constructed, and in part because it was one of very few schools serving African Americans. Almost immediately, Brown needed a new addition to provide more space, and that was constructed in 35. At the north 35 wing, where the number 2 is in the graphic, we have a 2-story activity room, which we'll be talking about a little bit more later. Next addition was a 2-story classroom wing that was added to the building on the south side in 1953. And then finally in 1971, that very large addition was placed on the north side, which is basically a 3-story classroom wing that wraps around the main gymnasium. Next slide. We wanted to talk a little bit about the existing building design language. So starting in the center, the original 32 building certainly has the most, I think, design interest in terms of the detailing present in the structure. We not only have the red brick, but there is a fair amount of accent material in the form of the limestone base and the stone banding at the datum courses and the cornice. And within the brickwork itself, there's also a detail in the form of change of plane. We have coining at the first floor element, and then also some slightly raised pilasters between the window pairings. That design language simplifies quite a bit with the later additions to the building. So along 26th Street, we have the east end of the 53 wing to the left. You can see that it's quite simple. There is a little bit of detailing in the form of almost a tone-on-tone soldier coursing banding, but no changes of plane that we see in the original building. And then finally on the right, the 71 wing, I feel goes a little rogue in its reinterpretation of the design language, and I'll just leave it at that. So if we go to the next slide, we'll take a look at some secondary elevations just to give a little bit more of the flavor of the existing conditions. So starting at the left, the south side of the 53 wing just shows a regular rhythm of windows as is to be expected in the classroom wing. Going to the center image, the 71 wing really provides a very bunker-like elevation towards what is really some fantastic open space right across the street. And then finally, you have to go all the way past the 71 addition to even see the 1935 wing, which is shown on the left. So the image at the bottom is the north end. And then if you keep going up the street, you get a glimpse of the side. So you can see here the expression of that volume of the two-story activity room. Slide. I won't spend a lot of time on this. I feel that the 71 addition has aesthetics that are not beloved. It's outside the period of historic significance. Overall, the construction quality seems to be of a lesser standard than the rest of the building. And over time, I know on the previous project, there was some discussion of lack of care of buildings over time. We certainly see that in this wing with damage from the earthquake in 2008, chronic roof leak evidence within the building. So really no one was upset when we decided that this should not be retained in the modernization. Next. So very quickly, we'll talk a little bit about siding and floor plans before we get to the new addition. Next slide. So as Andrew mentioned, our team had a series of discussions with some of the agencies over the summer that really focused on appropriate siting and setback for the new addition. So if we look at the site plan on the right, we can see the proposed addition is the smaller green box and connector. And then the footprint of the 1971 wing has been added just for context. So you can see how much smaller it is and how the consensus advice from the agencies this summer was that it would really be appropriate if the new addition and connector took a lot of design cues from the relationships that have been already set up with the south wing. So you can see here in plan that the setback of the connector from the face of the main building and the placement of the new addition are much, much more similar to what's going on with the south wing. And then finally at the left, you can see some massing perspectives that kind of show how this relates back to the existing structure that will remain. Slide. Here's the proposed site plan. Because the new addition has a much smaller footprint than what is there now, we're able to reclaim some fairly flat open space on the site, which is a rare commodity for the school. So we'll be using that for a lot of outdoor amenities for both the school and that could be shared with the neighboring community. Not much change along the front of the building with regards to entrances. The main entrance for the Brown School will be in the center of the 32 wing as it is now. We will be of a secondary entrance off of the east end of the 1953 wing at the west, as designated with the blue arrow, as the main entrance for that small child development center, and then taking advantage of being able to add an accessible entrance at the connector so that families with strollers or anyone who needs ADA accommodation has a clear pathway into the building. Next slide. We included the proposed floor plans for context. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these. At the ground floor, we have a combination of building that's below the grade plane towards the left, and at grade building, which includes the new addition, the gymnasium at the right. Centerpiece of this plan that we're calling the ground floor is the cafeteria. There is a lot of back of house mechanical space here, remaining in the location it is now. We are taking advantage of a few of the areas that have access to natural light to incorporate some special subject classrooms. To the right, we see the first floor plan, which is largely the same as it is now. The spaces are organized around the historic auditorium. On this floor, we have mainly the early childhood classroom space, which wraps around that auditorium and extends into the south wing at the left. The lighter pink color shows where the Child Development Center that we mentioned is. This is located within the building, but will function independently. And finally, on the first floor in the upper right, we have the library, which is going to allow us to take advantage of that double height activity room for what we feel a fantastic reading room. See the effects of the mothball strategy. So the second floor of the 1953 wing at the left is entirely mothballed, will not be occupied by Brown. And this level splits on the east side. We have the upper elementary grades 2 through 5 classrooms. On the west side, the middle school classrooms for students in grades 6 through 8. And finally, on the third floor, the entire floor is mothballed with the exception of one mechanical room that will house equipment that will serve this future partner space. And up the context, and I'll hand off to my colleague Aaron to walk us through the design proposed.
All right. Yep. Hi, my name is Aaron Rogers with Perkins Eastman, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the design of the new building. But first, I'd like to talk a little bit about how the existing building has been ordered. If you go to the next slide, please. So here is another diagram showing a similar information from before about the different constructions of the buildings. You can see here in the middle, in the light orange, is the original 1932 building. To the left of is the 1953 South Wing, and then all in the blue over there to the right is the 1971 edition. You can see how much space it takes in comparison to the rest of the buildings. On the bottom with the north elevation, you can see how it connects with the 1935 West Wing on the right in the yellow, and then the 2009 elevator addition that pokes out above it. Next slide, please. And going around the back of the building, you can see the 1935 West Wing dominates here with the 1932 building peaking above it and the 1953 South Wing to the side. And then with the south elevation, that is, of course, mostly the South Wing. Next slide, please. Going into the materials of it, in the 1935 building is made out of masonry, red brick with a limestone base with limestone cornices. And the 1971 building on the right is mainly made out of masonry as well with red brick, but also uses cast in place concrete, precast concrete as its secondary materials. Go to the next slide, please. So this is a little bit more of a blow up of this with the materials here. You can still see from the north facade the cornice, the limestone cornice of the 1932 building, and then the wraparound of the cast in place concrete. Slide, please. And then going around the north side, it's almost entirely, it is in fact entirely masonry around the back of the building. So going into more analysis of how the building is ordered itself, on the top diagram, you can see that there's a series of centrally located symmetry with all the buildings. The 1932 building specifically is centered with an order that has 5 bays of windows in it. On the bottom diagram, you can see that with the symmetry going straight down the middle of one of the windows. Same thing is on the 1950s wing here. You can see that they have a single bay of 6 windows, or 5 windows and a door for the connector, and then the one door and then the one window above it. The 1971 building The connector follows that same order as well, but the actual building itself, the gymnasium, breaks apart from that. Right. So going into the new gym addition, we'll talk a little bit more about how all this ties together. So here on the top diagram, you can see what we're pointing out here is in the 1932, starting from the middle of the diagram, the 1932 building, you have that center line that shows the symmetry, and we're showing the symmetry on the connector of the 1930 or 1950s connector, and then the 1950s building, and then the symmetry being pulled over into our new design, where in the connector where we have the symmetry going through the middle of the windows and the door, very similarly to the connector of the 1950s building, and then using the 5 windows on the right side for the gymnasium. And those pink windows right there, you can see them. We take those directly from the existing multi-story play area that's on the 1935 wing that you can see on the top right of the diagram being shown right now. So taking that into our design. This right here is the northern elevation of the building here. So what we have is continuing that symmetry. Slide, please. And then going on into the west courtyard elevation, we continue the same design language from before. Slide as well. So going into the materials that we were choosing. So one of the things that we were doing, yeah, if you could, I don't know if you all can see through our camera exactly how close these fiber cement panels are to matching the brick. The material diagram that you're seeing right here is mostly illustrative, but the intent is to take the fiber cement panels and match them as closely as possible to the tone and color of existing bricks, and then the new brick that we're going to have in the new gym addition as well. You all can see that, but it's pretty close. The base material of the new gym addition and the connection, we're using a silicate CMU that closely mimics the limestone base of the 1930s building. And then the 2009 elevator addition, we're trying to clad that in a perforated screening that would, since it's actually set back quite a ways from the front of the connector, it's to make it a little bit more visually distinct and sort of make it
more of a background element.
Yes, exactly. Go to the next slide, please. So here we have the northern elevation and the west courtyard elevation, west courtyard elevation, showing on the top left here we have the you can see the perforated screening of the 2009 elevator addition or elevator, and see how far back that is from the front of the building. I want to especially point out that the gymnasium addition is not flush with the front of the building. It's actually set back to be more in line with the setback of the 1950s addition, so that those are more cohesive. The design language wraps around the entire gymnasium and goes back into the courtyard, where the connector would be the same fiber cement panels. That would be on the other side, on the front side as well. Slide, please. And here's a few renderings that we have of the front of it. So here you can see it a little bit closer. Renders and diagrams are no substitute for seeing the materials in person, but we can get pretty close. So you can see the design intent here is to make sure that the panels and the brick are very close in coloration.
So Erin, why don't we talk a little bit about why we felt it was important to change the material of the connector because I
Yeah.
know Andrew particularly talked about that in his report.
Yeah, so making the design of the new construction to be recognizably visually distinct from the existing 1930 building is important so that we don't have any confusion that this is a new building as opposed to being a historic building that's existing as well. So we want to make sure that we have that visual distinction without mimicking it too closely.
Right. We also felt that the 1932 building, the masonry and the mortar have obviously aged and weathered over time, and even with a good restoration as part of the project, we feel it's going to be very challenging for a contemporary brick to match. We did take a number of samples out to the site, looked at them with regards to the 32, the 35, and the 53 brick, all of which are slightly different. We feel that the material we're proposing for the gym addition does closely approximate the red brick of the main building, but it's not going to look exactly alike. And we didn't want to bring a brick that's close but not the same up to the new as the connector material. We felt that intentionally changing the material would give us a little bit of a buffer, but hopefully not be jarringly different.
Mm-hmm. That's correct. So if you'd like to go to the next slide here. So here we can see more of the design language that we're showing here, wrapping around the entirety of the building, creating an interesting element here is where the base is. It goes up to 7 feet, and then it has like a little bit of an indentation of it so that it mimics sort of what's going on with the 1932 building as well, but sort of modernizes it.
And I believe, don't we also have some soldier bands here that are a little hard to see in some of these renderings?
Yeah. So there's also a lot of detailing in the brickwork as well to mimic the soldier courses that are in the 1930, 1950s building that are above around the parapet as well. So if you go to the next one, I'd like to hand it off to our partner, Elena Skoder McGee.
Hi, my name is Elena Skoder, and I'm representing Ronnie McGee and Associates. I would like to speak a little bit about our plans for existing building restoration. And next slide, please. Yes. We found with Andrew help that existing building was like character of windows and doors was changed during time. And right now we are trying to bring back like historical appearance of this building to during our rehabilitation. We found that existing windows, they have been hung windows, very simple. And we just will follow this windows. And for base of design, we selected Pella windows, traditional hung windows with wood windows with aluminum clad type. Next windows. And oh, I'm sorry. And next slide. And you can see that it is a late edition, what was built in 1953. And this edition has the same type of windows, what we will restore accordingly historical appearance. Please, next slide. As you see, there is existing doors and windows what we have right now, and it is different from the historical pictures what we showed before. Exterior windows, we will change, and you see window types below. Doors, exterior doors, we will replace with new doors. It will be fiberglass doors from the special light. But every vision light we will try to align with the exterior existing wood panels layout. Please, next slide. And a lot of attention we put for interior renovation of existing lobby and auditorium. Please, next slide. There is existing auditorium where we will try to we are trying to preserve all this plaster ceiling. We will replace light fixtures. All window trims will be preserved. Next slide. Here you see like our working documentation where we are showing all this preservation of historical elements and stage elements and side elements. We will preserve scale of the stage and curtain and everything. Next slide. Here is our auditorium section. And this one is view to existing stage. Every conduits from the walls we will demolish and illuminate from the walls and the ceiling. We will try to keep all walls with existing plaster preserved, and all trims around existing windows and trims, as I mentioned before, we preserved. Metal doors, what you can see on the historical lobby picture on the left corner, we will replace with wood style and rail doors. We will preserve flooring, terrazzo flooring, and stone flooring inside of the historical lobby. Here you can see our working documents with all this doors replacement. And here just the different view to auditorium doors. That's it what I wanted to present to you today. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Does that conclude your presentation? I see heads nodding. Okay. I think I see heads nodding. They're really tiny. Okay, perfect. All right. So any questions from the board at this time? Any questions? Quick question, given that we have this view up, did you consider, it looks like you have the combination of, did you say this is metal panel, or is this some sort of terracotta that's at the connector piece?
So the connector piece, the field that you see behind it, that is the fiber cement panel.
Oh, fiber cement, okay.
With pearl that we were looking at.
Mm-hmm.
And then the in between the windows, the little squares in between the two windows of that previous image is made out of metal panel.
Okay, all right. And then you have the brick masonry brick at the far right.
That's correct.
Larger mass. Okay. Did you look at coloration of the fiber cement that doesn't try to mimic brick. I'm just curious. I'm not sure. I mean, you've got the historic brick, and then you've got the fiber cement, and then the new brick, none of which are going to look alike, but they all look like they're trying to look like the historic. And I'm just wondering if you looked at any other possibilities of materiality, color specifically.
Yeah, so we originally looked at something a little bit more darker, but it's still within the earth tone range for fiber cement panels. But when we were having meetings with CFA and HPO together, we just decided that it would be better to look at more, focus our efforts on looking for something that, while it may not be the same color as the existing brick, something that might be more complementary to it.
Okay. All right. Other questions from board members? All right. We don't have anyone registered to testify on this case, so if there aren't any questions from the board, then we could be ready to deliberate. Are we ready? Again, I'll reiterate that Board Member Bell is recused from this, so he will not participate in our deliberation.
Madam Chair, before you do, may I respond to some of the comments that were made by the team?
Sure, absolutely. Please do.
Thank you. I want to first say that I appreciate the comments that Aaron and Christina made about differentiating the addition. But I also want to point out that I think that not confusing this as a historic wing it's going to be very obvious. The most notable difference is that they're proposing a very contemporary style of window. They're also talking about a spandrel panel. So I think it's very important to distinguish old from new. But I think, and then the point was also made about how it will be very difficult to match the brick of the different wings. So that is going to be another thing that would help you understand that not only is the new gymnasium a new building, but also the connector, which would be part of that, basically all part of one new project, rather than sort of you're creating two different surfaces here, two different materials where you have the fiber cement and a brick that isn't going to match directly. And I'm constantly have been stressing the importance of considering materials in the context of the overall historic district, and that it is traditional red brick in every single building. Even the 1970s edition, as was pointed out, used a traditional red brick for the most part. So I am very reluctant to have new materials be introduced in terms of not only how it affects Brown specifically, but the overall historic district. So again, while I appreciate the points that they're making, I think the fact that you're using contemporary window styles and a brick that isn't going to match exactly would be sufficient to help distinguish the old from new. So just wanted to go on record on that point.
Sure. Thanks, Andy. That's helpful too. I figured that within this context, brick makes the most sense. I was also responding to the east elevation where the fiber cement panel does look like it's a different color. It looks distinct from the masonry. And was just wondering if that exploration had occurred, but in the rendering, it certainly looks much more like it's trying to be more in the tone of the brick. Any other questions from board members? All right, then I'll ask that board members turn on their cameras. Assuming you can. All right, there we go. I see you guys now. All right, I think that this is a pretty respectful addition and renovation to the school campus. And apart from my one question, you know, I don't have any issues with this. I think that this has been done in a way that's very compatible and respectful of the historic building, the historic district. And so I would be in support of this. I just want to see if there are any comments or thoughts that others want to offer before making a motion. Okay. All right, then I will make a motion that we support the concept and ask for a second.
I'll second, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Then all those in favor say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? All right, thank you. The motion carries. Thank you all. Very thorough presentation.
Thank you very much.
And since the original case that was to be last on our agenda has been deferred at the request of the applicant, we've now reached the new end of our agenda. 630 G Street in the Capitol Hill Historic District. Would staff like to present?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is Todd Jones with HPO staff. This project is 630 G Street Southeast. It should look familiar because the board saw it last month. As a reminder, this property is a circa 1841 detached brick house located next to Christ Church. The church and house are visible in the historic photo in the upper right corner of the slide. As you might recall, the church is set back considerably from the street, which will cause high visibility of the proposed work on the west elevation of this property. The applicant proposes to construct a 3-story rear addition as well as add a roof deck that will be atop the rear addition and about half of the historic house. Access to the roof deck will be via a penthouse that will be built through the roof of the historic house. At the last meeting in November, the board voted to support the concept generally, but asked for a few revisions. The board wanted to see the penthouse stair moved to the rear roof of the historic house to limit the roof deck to only above the new rear addition and to make the rear addition appear more distinct from the existing house. The revised west elevation is in the upper left corner of the slide. The applicant simplified the cornice of the rear addition and lowered it by a perceptual though not significant amount, which is what the board had asked for. Staff believes these revisions sufficiently address the board's root concerns and have helped create a fair distinction between old and new. The distinction is further emphasized when looking at elements that had already been included, such as the contrasting fenestration, the use of brick sills and lintels compared to the existing stone, and the fact that there's a vertical offset of about 3 inches between the existing house and rear addition. In regard to the roof deck, the applicant has said that relocating the penthouse, as the board recommended, was evaluated but presented substantial challenges, which the architect will explain, so the penthouse was not moved. However, its roof was lowered by about 6.5 inches. In addition, the railing of the roof deck was brought inward for a revised setback of about 4 feet 6 inches. The applicant also made a series of small revisions to the roof deck structure and the roof, which the architect will discuss, that together will lower the roof deck's usable floor by about an additional 16 inches while keeping the parapet at nearly the same height. Staff is confident that these latest revisions will render the roof deck not visible while also adequately hiding rooftop activities. A flag test based on the previous concept was viewed by staff before the November board meeting, and it was clear then that the penthouse and roof deck would not be visible. Now, with both the deck and the penthouse lowered even further, that masking of activity will be even greater. In the last meeting, the board did ask that the roof deck be limited to only above the new rear addition. Staff believes that the applicant's latest revisions makes that change less important since rooftop activity atop the historic house will be sufficiently masked. However, if the board would still prefer that the roof deck be limited to the rear, and if the board accepts the proposed location of the penthouse, then a condition can be attached to the board's vote in accordance with the image you see on the slide. At the bottom of the slide is the applicant's proposed roof deck plan. Staff added the red rectangle that approximately depicts the portion of the proposed roof deck that would be removed under this condition. This plan provides for only a narrow corridor from the penthouse to the occupiable roof deck above the rear addition. This plan assumes that the penthouse cannot be relocated, but keeps it in place solely for access reasons. This condition will better guarantee that the vast majority of rooftop activity will occur at the rear. So HPO recommends the board approve the concept with or without the roof deck condition just outlined and find the project compatible with the Capitol Hill Historic District and delegated approval authority to staff. Thank you, and I'll now turn it over to the applicant for more details.
Okay. Thank you, Todd. If the applicant could just focus on the revisions you made in response to the board's comments and really this.
Sure.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Hello, my name is George Anthony Wilder, the architect working on 630 G Street. There we go. If we just next slide, please. We'll flip through, make it quick. Next slide. 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 Here we go. So with the cornice of the addition, like Todd said, you guys asked if we could simplify its profile and reduce its height slightly. Next slide. This is what we originally presented to you guys. It was like a mini-me version. The cornice on the addition was a mini-me version of the main cornice. Next slide. We had two simplified versions. This one, which is like a 3-tiered cornice. Next slide. And then the other one, which is like a 2-tiered cornice. Next slide. And that shows it in elevation there with the original to the left and the two simplified versions, middle and right. That was that's it on the cornice. Next slide, please. So the penthouse and the roof deck, like Todd was saying, that you're asking if we could push the penthouse back over the addition and reduce the footprint of the deck to roof. Next slide, please. So that was the original roof deck submission. Next slide. This is the overlaid over the floor below. So you see that area in green is our horizontal vertical circulation. We have the elevator there. We have a powder room, the stairs to go down, and some hallway space. Then the red area is the proposed primary bedroom, and that blue is the vertical circulation up to the roof. So as you can see, if you take that blue and you kind of slide it to the right, it's gonna effectively chop the proposed bedroom in half or into a fraction, and you'd have to leave the bedroom to go out into the hallway to come back into another portion of the bedroom. So next slide. We were looking at other ways we could do it. Todd went through those. Next slide, please. Originally the roof deck was sitting on sleepers on top of the roof deck. So we removed the sleepers from that, and we made the roof, the top of the roof, the actual deck. And we also reduced the roof structure down from 18 inches to 12, which was that blue line in there. And then so that everything brought that down about 14.75 of an inch. You can see the silhouette, how high that is, and relative to the the parapet, and then on the right, on the left-hand side, that was the original. On the right-hand side, the proposed, where that silhouette is brought down a lot. Next slide, please. I think we get. And also on the alley side, we brought the railing in further. So it was originally 310. We brought that into 4.6, just to push the activity in further away from the edge of the building on that side to really help try to hide any proposed activity. Next slide, please. So here's a section through the open space in front of the church up onto the roof deck. So you can really see that people down in front of the church in that open area there, they're really not going to get a view like drawing a line from any one of those silhouettes, eye lines up to the roof deck. It's really that area of which is going to be hidden to view is really drastically improved. Next slide, please. So that was it. We just wanted to, also just, there is a character. There's two overlapping characters of the neighborhood. You have your built environment, and then you have what people do. And this is a neighborhood where there are very tight lots. That's one of the characteristics of this neighborhood. And so people really try every, they take advantage of every outdoor area that they have in the neighborhood. And it's a very valuable resource. Next slide. And next slide. And you can see, like, if, without having the people there to invest in the neighborhood, it's really not, it doesn't matter if the building has some historical context or not. It's not, without someone there to invest in it, it's not really, it's just going to go to ruin. Next slide, please. Next slide. And we can see examples of this overlapping of characters throughout the neighborhood, where you have the historic built environment, and then you have people just taking advantage of their spaces. So you can see here, got a patio chair sitting out front. Next slide. And it seems like the two kind of reinforce each other. It's not necessarily one or the other. Some of the streets where you walk down, if you don't see, it seemed like the streets that had less of this stuff seemed less vibrant than the streets that did have the outdoor character. Next slide, please. There peeks into this private world. Next slide, please. Some patio furniture and grills out there. Next slide. And so in conclusion, we just want to say that we do have the support of the neighbors. We had the support of the ANC. We had the support of the Capitol Hill Restoration Society. And it looks like we have the support of the staff on this. We have a family that lives in the Hill that's looking to reinvest in the community. We have a building that will be heavily invested in, ensuring its legacy into the future for many generations to come. In addition, a rooftop garden that will bring a positive impact to the character of the surrounding environment. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Board members have any questions? If there are no burning questions, I'm gonna ask that we hear from Beth Purcell with Capitol Hill Restoration Society, and then we can come back to the board.
Hi, good morning, board members. This is Beth Purcell with the Capitol Hill Restoration Society. Our only comments really relate to the penthouse stair and to the roof deck. As you heard, the applicant is proposing to not relocate penthouse stair as the board had requested. And while it is maybe challenging, we believe the stair can be moved further to the rear of the addition by flipping the location of the roof stair with the adjacent dressing room / closet and creating a new window opening on a non-primary elevation. As the applicant has pointed out, the disadvantage of this proposal would be that this room would no longer be part of the master suite, but it can be done. Concerning the roof deck, we believe that the larger deck would not cause any visual harm. However, we have no objection to the staff's proposal for a restricted roof deck. And thank you for considering our comments.
Thank you, Ms. Purcell. Any questions for her from the board? All right. Then any last questions for the applicant? If there are not, then I'll ask board members to turn on your cameras and we can discuss the options and direction forward. And if you could go back to the slide with the cornice options. I believe where, I mean, I would be fine with 2 or 3, proposed option 1 or 2, but I think the simplification of 2 might be my preferred. I don't know if others have thoughts on whether one of these works or not.
I kind of prefer 1 because I find the general, talk about splitting hairs, but the equal dimension between the 2 pieces on 2 to be less like a cornice. There's more hierarchy about the piece in option 1. I appreciate very much the study that they've done here to show this. I could live with either one, but I slightly lean towards option 1.
Okay. Anybody else have a preference? All right. Like I said, I could go either way. I think they're both better than the original. Any thoughts on the roof deck? If we could.
Can we flip back to that section drawing that shows the visibility from the space in front of the So, Madam Chair, if we were looking at this and this was just a street, right? The figures closest to the house would be the ones we'd be most worried about, right?
Right.
So in other words, how wide is this space? Does anybody know how wide this space is?
No. I mean, we'd have
Does
to.
anybody at OP know how wide that space is? I mean, it seems to me that if you're looking at the typical condition would be this on a street, and you wouldn't see it. Now, I think what they're trying to argue here is there's been reasonable accommodation made for the whole width of the space, right? Which is an unusual condition. Not to say that it doesn't happen, but we don't often have this condition. We more often have it cutting across the space of a street. So does anybody know how wide that is relative to?
Is that something you know the answer to?
This is Todd from staff. It looks to be about almost 80 feet from the house to across the churchyard to the house on the other side.
Okay, from the facade to facade, about thereabouts.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So I don't know. I mean, my sense is a reasonable attempt at accommodating this has been made. That they have lowered the roof deck. They have, that seems to have a pretty good impact. So, it's not necessarily. I think I've heard it said that it's not necessarily a hard and fast rule that you can't see additions from the street, but in this particular case, I think I'm positively disposed towards what's being proposed because I think they've done a very thoughtful job of trying to respond to the concerns.
Right.
I can see there's great agreement with that here, right?
On the contrary, I think it is a hard and fast rule, but we often are asked to make exceptions for various reasons. And some of it is limited visibility. Some of it is construction over new construction, not over the historic. So there are a variety of reasons, but it is a pretty hard and fast rule.
Is it written down? Do we note it in writing, that the addition shouldn't be seen above rooftops and things?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. Well.
Yeah. Did you have thoughts, Gretchen?
I'm still stuck on the stair. I think there's a way to make that stair work. And it means that the plan has to jog around in there, but they can jog the plan around. It's not like they have to compromise the bedroom by moving the stair to the one direction or, you know, the one direction that they offered us. There's other solutions, I think, to make that work. So I would ask staff to continue to work with them to do that.
But are we saying that we don't believe that the visibility here would be, are we saying that this drawing's not accurate then? Because I think what they're trying to say is you wouldn't see it.
It's hard to imagine you wouldn't, but yeah,
I was gonna,
showing it.
I don't necessarily know that I follow the drawing. I see, well, I should say I understand what the drawing is supposed to show, but I don't know that I agree with it in terms of there being little visibility.
And the stair's not
Um,
depicted on here.
Yeah.
That's true, actually. You'd want to outline the stair, wouldn't you?
Right.
To make sure you saw that.
And the grade there is not flat.
So the grade might be rolling up to allow people to see
A
it.
little bit.
Is
It's not a
that what
steep
we're saying?
slope, but it
Yeah.
does roll up.
Can we go back to the plan of the upper level there? Okay. So what we're asking them to do is, Gretchen, to sort of, you're saying that they should still keep studying putting the stair in the addition.
Yeah.
Can you go to the that level there?
Mm-hmm.
And that stair only goes to the roof.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The blue stair. The blue stair only goes to the roof.
Yeah. It's
Right. So they, so they offered, moving it to the right, right? But why does it have to be a U-shaped stair? There are
Could
many
be a
other
single
shapes of
straight run.
stairs.
Right.
Yeah, or an L, or, there are a number of different, I'm not saying they should go with a spiral, right? But there are a number of configurations that perhaps could be looked at with staff.
But is the idea that is this like one giant master suite? Is that what we're looking at here?
Yes.
That's what this is. Okay. Well, in the absence of any kind of knowledge of where the stair would be visible, and if we want to, like, if we're going to be true to what Gretchen said, then we need to see an exhibit that shows the stair wouldn't be visible, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, that
Right.
exhibit to me is sort of pointless because
That's showing where the people are, but not where
Right.
the stair is.
Right. I'm less worried about the people. So.
Right.
I'm sorry I'm not supposed to speak, but we do have a slide showing that.
Is it in the show?
Yes, it's further down in like the supplemental information.
I think we should take a look at it if that's okay with you.
For sure.
Gretchen, you must be driving some long distance today.
I am. I am.
It's holiday time.
I'm actually going to survey a temple in Cleveland, Ohio.
Well, that's not holiday related.
No.
Make sure you go see that West Side Market.
Yeah, I will, definitely. It's really beautiful there during the holidays, so it'd be nice.
What we need is the angle where you would see it. Did you have a similar section through the stair enclosure that you had that showed the people?
Yep, keep going. There you go. This is if we moved it towards the back. This was showing it if if we took that same massing and moved it to where the parapet was lower, you might actually have a visibility of it if it was moved over the addition. If you keep going there, I think there's one with it right there. So that's showing it in the current proposed area.
Again, all with the U-shaped stair, right?
Right,
Yes.
but I think, is it what you're saying that if it went over the addition, because of the lower parapet there, you would see it, but we'd have less problem with it being visible over the addition, right? Is that what we're saying?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So what is this telling us?
I'm just asking that they work with staff to explore an option that isn't maybe necessarily the same stair or the same stair shifted to compromise the beautiful master suite they're trying to create. But maybe there's a different shaped stair, either a straight run or an L, or something that could work within the space in a better fashion. So that if there is a visibility of the stair penthouse, it's over the addition, not over the historic building.
I know, but it's this drawing trying to convince us that it's not visible?
Looks like
Yeah, that's what this drawing is, to convince you of. And we also did a flag test too, just to show that it wasn't visible. And the flag test was at the pre-lowered height, and so even at that point, it wasn't visible. And now we've even lowered it further because the roof has been lowered. So it's, I mean, we're 100% confident that you're not going to be able to see this.
So my feeling is, wouldn't it be true then that if we couldn't see it, then doesn't it fall within our rules if you can't see it?
Yeah. And a different, my thought is a different configuration is still not, would still not be visible. So I'm not sure what we would accomplish with asking them to reconfigure.
I just don't recall seeing the flag test. I don't know. Maybe I'm having selective memory.
All right.
I'm glad to be the outlier on this one.
Well, maybe what I'll do then is I'll make a motion that we support the revisions with the first option for the cornice as it's been presented today, and that we allow for the stair so long as a flag test is done and it is not visible.
Sounds good to me.
That's good.
All right.
Second that.
Okay, thanks.
If
Then
only Congress behaved this way.
I bet.
you want to run, Matt?
No, I'm in the district. It wouldn't matter.
All right, right. Yes, yep. All of us are, so.
I know. And Eleanor Holmesworth, I'm happy with her, you know.
Right.
She's great.
Yes. All right, then all those in favor of the concept, not of our political discussion, please signify by saying aye.
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 I think that's all of us, so the motion carries. Thank you, everyone, and happy holidays. Drive safely, Gretchen.
Same to you. Same to
Happy
everybody.
holidays and happy New Year.
Holidays.
See you all next year. Yep.
See you in July or
Yep.
January.
January.
All right. Bye.